I gave my niece a laptop on her birthday and she screamed at me because it wasn't brand new. What's the most ungrateful thing you see someone do? To put some perspective on this, there are some kids out there who are super appreciative and don't throw a tantrum at every wrong present. My son's birthday is 2 months before Christmas, and we are painfully poor besides, so he got a present for his birthday, which sounds cheap, but he's only ever gotten one, which this year I let him pick out, and he picked out an Xbox game we could play together. But between that and other bills around that time of year, there was no money for Christmas presents. I was beside myself. I didn't know what I was going to do. So I finally sat him down and told him we would do something really special together, like go to the movies, instead of have presents this year. He wasn't even disappointed. He just wanted to start looking at movie trailers right away, so he could pick which movie we were going to see. Bonus, my parents gave me a little bit of money for Christmas, like $50, and I was able to take him out to dinner too. He hugged me when we got home and told me it had been the best Christmas ever. He can still be a little snot, but I don't think I ever have to worry about him pulling shit like this. Edit. Seriously, people, yes, we are first world poor. Use some common sense. When I was younger I worked at a Blockbuster. I was the night shift manager, and one night I was working by myself when a customer walks up and hands me a woman's wallet, says he found it on the ground. I peeked inside it to find an ID/membership card so I could look up her account/phone number. Sure enough, she had been in the store about 30 minutes earlier, so I gave her a call. She seemed pleased on the phone and said she would be right in. Store policy for something like that was to lock the item in the safe until the customer arrives. I did so and went about my business. About an hour later the woman comes in and asks for her wallet. I tell her it's going to be 15 minutes as the safe was timed and ask her to wait. This was apparently unacceptable and she asked if I could get it faster than that. Told her no and continued helping other customers while she waited. Once the safe beeped I grabbed her wallet and handed it to her. I had to put the line of customers on hold while I did this because I wanted her out of the store as soon as possible, since she had spent the last 15 minutes fuming and standing right next to my register. As soon as I hand her the wallet she says my money better be in here. I explained that I honestly had no idea as I didn't open it all the way as her membership card was on an outer flap. This was one of those large female wallets that was more like a mini purse with lots of flaps and zippers and such. After handing it to her I asked for the next customer in line to step up and basically tried ignoring her. She starts screaming my money is gone, you stole my money, which really surprised me as she was a pretty normal looking soccer mom type. I ask the customer I'm helping to wait a second and explain to her the way the wallet was handed to me and reiterated that I had not personally opened the wallet any further than the first flap. She starts screaming again saying there was over $200 in it and that she was calling the police. I shrug and tell her to go ahead. At this point I'm completely satisfied to ignore her. She walks to the back of the store and whips out her cell phone. I continue helping the line as customers are looking back at the woman as she is loudly calling the police. Most of the customers are like what a beach etc. I just shrug and smile. After the line was cleared the lady comes back to the register and tells me with a super smug look, the police are on the way. Okay, I say and give her a I don't give a fuck shrug and ignore her while checking in movies. About an hour later a cop finally enters the store. She waited right next to my register the entire time and she starts waving at him and pointing at me at the same time. I see the cop and roll my eyes and shake my head. He asks her to repeat a story and as she's repeating it, he's almost completely ignoring her and watching the football game that we have playing on our DirecTV kiosk. After she gets done he looks at me, rolls his eyes and asks did you take the money? Of course not, I say. I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do ma'am, the cop says and leaves the store. As he leaves he holds the door for her and tells her to leave if her business is complete. I smiled super big, like Cheshire Cat big, and told her to have a super day as she left. After she left I bought pizza with the $200 I took. Just kidding, but I almost wish that's how the story ended after she embarrassed me like that for close to 2 hours. I saw this woman on the side of the road who had a flat tire and was clearly having issues changing it. So polite ol' me decided to halt my run and go see if I could help out. I stroll over and offer my services to her and she accepts, but she backs away to a pretty far distance. I proceed to change her tire and help get her on her way, and as soon as I finish and proceed to extend my arm for a handshake, she says back away. I have 911 on my phone right now and all I have to do is press call. I don't know if she thought I was going to attack her or something, but you don't just do that to someone who just helped you change your damn tire. Flabbergasted, I run away, and I haven't seen that beach since. Edit. I do understand that I don't understand what she may have been through in the past, but if it was that uncomfortable for her to accept help from a stranger, then she should have just thanked me for offering but graciously declined. Not accepted my help, then threatened to call 911 on me. I have 2 nephews aged 14 and 12, and they have every game console out there. So thinking I was going to be the coolest aunt ever, I bought them 4 of the latest games, and they were over $50 each. I don't see them often. I wanted to do something special. $250 is a lot of money in my budget. They took one look at the games, said they suck, threw them against the wall, and broke the cases. I picked them up, took them back to the store, but they refused to take 3 of them back due to the damage. I ended up selling them at the mall to one of those game stores. Got almost nothing for them. Never again. Edit. 1. Thank you so much everyone for the amazing support and kind words. I'm new to Reddit and this is pretty cool. I'm in love with this community. I have lots of offers for new nephews and nieces. This is all really sweet too. I'm getting lots of questions as to what games they were, and honestly I can't remember all of them. I do recall one was a war game. Sorta like COD, one was a Super Mario, and one other was a role-playing game. I did a lot of research before dropping so much money on games. I checked with co-workers who have kids the same age, and even called my brother to double check. As one of the redditors put it, it's not because lots of people like Twilight that everyone should. The quality of the game is not the issue here, although gamers will say otherwise. It was the reaction that really upset me. 3. For the ones trying to check my math, the games were all fresh releases, and they were over $50 as I said previously. Also, in the US sales tax is added to the total purchase. In some states the sales tax is upwards of 8%. 4. Last but not least, my family is great. I love them. I'm sharing one bad experience with you guys. It is not like things are all bad. The kids can be bratty, well, they're kids, but 90% of the time they are super cool and a lot of fun. My brother's humor, well it needs work. He's a super cool big brother though. I'm true believer we all have our issues, and we are all jerks every now and then. I'm glad I have a great family that will put up with my own flaws, as I put up with this. Edit 2. Thanks for my fellow redditors for explaining spacing the paragraphs, agree disagree, and to recall what the 4th game was. FIFA, Jinga_Ninja. I work at a pet store. A few months ago, we had a Scarlet macaw up for sale. I was weighing her in the front of the store, since we have to track their growth when we get them at the store. Little kid and her grandfather come in the store while I'm doing this. The little girl, who looks about 10 years old enough to know better, runs towards the bird. This is already not good. It took me a good 10 minutes to coax the poor bird out of her cage to get weighed. She's a very timid bird, and she's slow to trust people. So the little girl is running at me with a very large bird on my arm, spooks the bird who jumps off of my arm and luckily lands on the register counter, which is where the scale is anyway. As politely as I could, I asked the girl to please take a few steps back because the bird is very afraid right now. That she is very shy around new people and that the girl can watch, but just keep her distance. She was okay with that for about 10 seconds. After I weighed the bird, I got her to step back up onto my arm and told the little girl I had to take her back to her cage now and give her some treats for being a good bird while she got weighed. This did not go over well. The little girl followed me back to the cage and kept asking if she could pet the bird. In case you don't know much about birds, this is a Scarlet macaw. They have very large and very strong beaks. If they feel threatened enough, they will defend themselves with that beak, and I have no doubt that they could easily take a finger off if they wanted to. So she asks if she can pet it. I told her no, I'm sorry, but she doesn't like strangers touching her, and she might try to bite you. I don't want you to get hurt. Wrong thing to say apparently. I wanna pet the bird. Let me pet it. Let me pet the bird. She started throwing a temper tantrum, and I just ignored her at this point, since the macaw was starting to bite me now on the arm. I still have bruises from this, and I just wanted to get her in the cage and get the girl as far away as possible. And this whole time, her grandfather was just standing there watching. He didn't say anything, just let her carry on. So I get the bird back in the cage, and she's now on the other side of the cage, sticking her fingers in the cage. Again, I ask her to back up. The bird can lunge and bite her very easily, so she backs up. Thank God. I was thinking to myself, maybe she'll go look at the hamsters or something else now. Nope. She goes up to her grandfather and literally screams at him, "Buy me that bird. I want that bird. Buy it for me." He just looked at me and asked how much it was. My jaw nearly dropped to the floor. First off, I tell him that bird is $2,000 plus the cost of the cage, plus food, substrate, etc. Second off, they can live quite a long time. On average in captivity they can get up to 50 years old, and sometimes longer. This is not something you buy because a 10-year-old girl is demanding you buy it for her. I actually had to stand there and talk him out of buying this bird for about 10 minutes. At least I could figure out where this girl got her attitude from. He was about to buy a screaming 10-year-old a $2,000 bird without a second thought. Good lord. I lost some of my faith in humanity that day. Luckily, they walked out of the store after that, and she did not leave quietly. She was kicking and screaming the whole way out of the store. I haven't seen them since, thank God. TLDR, little girl throws temper tantrum over exotic bird. Edit, this is Lucy. She's still up for sale and doesn't have any psychological scars from the incident with a screaming spoiled brat. As you can see, her favorite thing to do is sit awkwardly on her food bowl, even though she has like 3 other bigger perches in that cage. I have quite a few I could tell about my little sister. I'll stick to 2. My mom bought her numerous laptops, iPhones, and cameras on the condition that she take care of them. Every one was broken in a month or 2. Bought her a $900 digital SLR she knows I've been coveting for years because my sister claimed she was going to take a photography course at school. Got the camera, beached that she didn't get any other presents, used it for a day then let it sit around for 6 months. She uses it now for pictures on her Tumblr, but she told my mom she never intended to take a photography course and she can only use the damn thing on auto. For Easter I spent a couple $100 buying her tons of Hunger Games stuff and random stuff for an Easter basket because I stupidly wanted to do something nice. I'd just pick up random stuff over the course of a few months that I thought she'd like. She was upset that my mom wouldn't be doing baskets anymore because she's 15. She threw a tantrum after she opened everything because Easter sucked, because we wouldn't hide Easter eggs for her or hide plastic ones filled with money like her friend's parents did. She's 15 for fake sake. I haven't gotten her a damn thing since. I bought my mom a MacBook Air to pay her back 4 years of caring for me, and my sister threw the biggest tantrum ever. She clawed at my mom's face and tried to steal her car because it wasn't fair that my mom got something nice for the first time ever. Literally, ever. My sister has since accidentally broken her laptop hoping I'd buy her one too. Not going to ever faking happen. That turned into an epic rant. A couple years ago a friend and I were driving across the country in a big moving truck full of my mom's furniture. We had been on the road for about 18 hours on the second to last day of the trip and stopped at a rest stop to stretch our legs and use the bathroom. Sitting at the rest stop late at night was an entire family, mom, dad and 2 young kids in their car which was obviously broken or otherwise not working. Feeling like I should try and help I asked the father what was wrong and he told me they had run out of gas and just needed to get to the next town which was about 40 miles away. I couldn't leave the rest stop with that family stranded, so my friend and I got back in the truck and drove the 40-ish miles to the next town, bought gas and a can and drove all the way back in our huge moving truck. The whole trip back and forth took us about an hour and a half, and by the time we got back to the rest stop we were both about to pass out. Well, the family was still there waiting, and I hopped out to give them the gas they needed so badly. I handed the can to the father and he looked at me and said I would rather have the money. This caught me off guard as money wouldn't help them get anywhere, but it was then that it dawned on me that he never wanted gas to begin with and probably had some in the car. He was just fishing for cash and using his kids as the bait. I felt really bad for the mom as she was just looking at me the whole time with this expression of "I'm so sorry." I was at a loss for words, since the dad didn't even want the gas we had just driven for over an hour to get for them. I just set the gas can on the ground, got back in the truck, and left feeling like a giant idiot. TLDR, I saved a man's life and he tried to sue me. Around 2:30 AM on a Friday night, Saturday morning, a friend and I witnessed a pickup truck run a red light and barrel through a white taxi van doing about 50 miles per hour. +/-5 miles per hour, no brakes, just crash. The white van instantly was spun around a couple of times until it hit against a light pole. My friend and I were in complete shock, but were the only ones around, so we got out of my truck to go help. On the way to the van my friend called 911, and a fire started flaring up from inside the crumpled hood. The man inside was bleeding everywhere and obviously very hurt. However, the driver's door was smashed so much I couldn't open the door and the passenger door was blocked and resting against the light pole. By this time the fire under the hood is starting to engulf the front part of the van and getting very hot. I took my shirt off, wrapped it around my hand and broke out what was left of the glass on the driver's side door, and proceeded to pull the man head first out of the van with the help of my friend and drag him about 30 feet away to a grassy area by an office building. About 2 minutes later the entire front portion of the van is in flames. Another minute later the fire department showed and put it out. I gave my information and such to the police officers. The man I pulled from the van thanked me over and over again. I thought I had done my good deed for the day. 1 week later I'm served papers stating I caused physical and emotional damage/distress to the man, and he was suing me for $100,000. One awesome public defender, 3 witnesses, and 4 days in court later he lost. My son was 6 and was really into trains. He had a fantastic wooden train set with all the bells and whistles, and he and I spent hours putting it together in different ways and playing. But he kept begging for an electric train, begging and begging. I told him not until you're 8. Well, that Christmas I decided to surprise him, and I put together a small electric train set on a 4x8 piece of plywood. I couldn't spend exorbitant amounts on it, but it was a nice oval with a split off that went up and over the main track and rejoined. A couple of engines, a few cars, some simple trees and a crossing with lights. It wasn't much, but I spent hours putting it together after the kids went to bed every night. Christmas morning comes, all the gifts unwrapped, and I tell my oldest, "There's another surprise for you downstairs." He ran down and found the train and his eyes lit up. He was so excited. I showed him how to work it, then went upstairs briefly to help pick up. 10 minutes later I'm coming back downstairs to play with him, and the train set, and he's walking up the stairs. He looks me in the eye and says, "It's kind of boring," and walked past me. Yeah, I admit it. I faking cried. Edit. Wanted to thank everyone for all the awesome comments and votes. Just to clear, he was 6 when I built it. I told him he had to wait until he was 8 so I could surprise him. I only built it for him because he had begged so long and hard. He found out pretty quick from his mom how it had hurt me and was very sweet the rest of the day. He's 14 now and definitely not spoiled and a great kid, so I think there was a good lesson here for him. About being grateful. I'm typing this on a Toshiba satellite. They're pretty good, and it was a thoughtful gift, even if she didn't appreciate it. I work at a McDonald's and a while back I was taking orders and payments for the drive-thru by myself. A woman came through and ordered 2 Big Macs, 2 large fries and 2 Cokes, which came to a total of like $21. It's Australia. Our prices are ridiculous. In the time she took to drive from the speaker box to the cashier window, I re-entered them as large meals to save her some money, and as she pulled up I said, "Hey, that'll be $16.XX, thank you." She eyed me strangely as she fished out some money, and when I held out her change and a receipt she snatched them out of my hand and looked over what she had ordered. After what seemed like an eternity she started shouting at me about how she didn't want meals, she just wanted the burgers, fries, and drinks. It actually comes up pretty frequently as understandably not every customer knows the ins and outs of the McDonald's menu, and generally when you explain what they've actually paid for they apologize and are appreciative of the money you've saved them. So I start going through the routine with this woman, explaining the components of a meal and how she'd actually saved $5 while still getting exactly what she ordered. I stood there waiting for her to realize she'd benefited from what I'd done when all of a sudden she started hurling insults at me. Stuff like, "I come through and order this every week and it's always been the same, you presumptuous little bitch," and "How faking dare you think I'm such a moron that I don't know how to order my own faking food." I tried explaining that I didn't think she was a moron, it was just my job to give customers the best value, and I was sorry that no one had done it before, and she threw her change at me, about 60 cents, and drove off. In this time a woman in another car had actually come through to order a free cup of water and had driven straight to the payment window, and as a result had seen most of the abuse this woman had given me. As she pulled up I was visibly shaking, because despite verbal abuse being one of the things you're expected to handle as a drive-through worker, I'd never been treated that badly, and she started telling me that she saw and heard the whole thing and that I was totally in the right and asked me if I was okay. I talked to her for a while and ended up putting through a free Coke for her because I appreciated her making sure I was alright. Eventually she left and I went into the change rooms and cried for about 10 minutes. TLDR, woman saves $5 on fast food order thanks to teenage girl, calls her a beach, and makes her cry. My friend's youngest daughter had a Dora the Explorer birthday party for her 4th birthday, which was in August, so naturally I assumed she liked Dora the Explorer. Come Christmas time I bought her a set of Dora's baby sister and brother. It cost about $30, which is a lot to spend on a child I didn't birth. She opened it up, started screaming that it was for babies, and she is too old for Dora now. Her mum took her home without her present, so I gave the dolls to my youngest who fell in love with them. A few weeks later, when she came over to our house she threw a tantrum and took the dolls home because they were hers first. I know that kids don't have a filter when it comes to manners, but I know my kids would never do anything like that. They have received some pretty strange gifts from relatives in the past, and they just say thank you and pretend to be excited about it until they get it home and throw it to the bottom of the toy box. Edit, because a lot of people are asking why I let the 4-year-old take the dolls back. In the end it wasn't up to me. I tried to convince her that she hadn't wanted the dolls and now my daughter loved them. Her mother, her older sister and I all told her she was being silly and she didn't deserve to have the dolls back. She didn't listen and started throwing a tantrum of ginormous proportions. My daughter, who was only 18 months at the time, saw all his happening and gave the dolls to the 4-year-old and said in toddler speak, "Oh, can I have them now?" She wasn't upset about handing them over. I think she was actually quite proud of herself because she managed to stop the screaming tantrum. I bought her a set of dolls of her own later that week. Valentine's Day, 2004. Now, I've never given two shits about Valentine's Day, but my girlfriend at the time had never been in a serious relationship and wanted a special Valentine's Day. I was more than happy to oblige. That day, I went to the local nursery, flowers, not babies, where I used to work, and bought 2 dozen red roses and grabbed an unused delivery invoice. I still had the uniform, just a t-shirt and hat, but enough to make me look like a legit delivery person. I then spent my entire paycheck on gifts for her and food for dinner. Everything, balloons, decorations, red and pink cutsy sheet, and several expensive gifts including an iPod and a new camera. I went back to her house and decorated everything, transforming her kitchen and living room into what looked like a display at the mall. I even did the rose petals on the bed thing because I was sure my efforts would lead to a romantic evening. I looked up her class schedule to figure out where her class was. We had different majors and proceeded to burst in, pretending to be a delivery person. I gave her the roses and a teddy bear in front of her entire class, even going as far as making her sign the fake delivery invoice. It was her last class of the day, so I knew she'd be heading home. I raced out of there so I could get there first, change, and start cooking dinner. I got there maybe 20 minutes before she did, and everything was going to plan. She was upset when she walked in the door. "Why didn't you wait for me after class?" she asked. I told her I wanted to start dinner before she got home and finish decorating the house. "Oh, I really wanted to go out to dinner tonight. Can we go out to dinner?" I explained that I was going to make something special at home and had, in fact, already started cooking. She looked at the table full of presents and the house full of decorations and just sighed, disappointed. I really wanted this to be a special Valentine's Day. Just this once. I was really hoping we could have a special day together, but I guess not. TLDR, spent $800 on Valentine's Day, put on a great show, and it wasn't good enough. Never again. Times were very tough the last few years when I was living at home. My dad worked 2 jobs, my mother worked, I worked, and my brother worked. We all helped to pay the mortgage on the house and the bills. We all worked to save money and cut costs here and there, but still lived a pretty nice lifestyle. One day my father was talking about defaulting on the mortgage. I pushed even harder to save money at that point and pretty much gave my entire paycheck each week to assist. I explained to him we need to get rid of things we do not need. He likes to provide us kids with all we want, so it does not come naturally to him to cancel a $300 cable/internet bill. He does not want to affect us kids. I told him it had to be done. We would drop cable and get a super slow internet for $20 a month. My sister walked in the room. 20 years old, never had a job. Sits around the house all day. Has done less chores in her lifetime than my brother has done in a day. And bitches and screams about not cancelling cable. It is the only thing she has left to do all day. I calmly explained to her that we cannot afford it and we do not have a choice. She stands her ground. Not that her opinion mattered in the discussion. I grabbed the cable boxes and returned them that day and had the unit dropped to the cheapest they offered. 10 years later to this day my sister is still this same exact way. A firm but fair father, a loving but firm mother, 2 hard-working sons who have paid for everything on their own, no debt whatsoever, and then her, swapping between welfare and living with my parents, complaining every step of the way. No appreciation on her part that I have ever seen. Father and 17-year-old daughter came into the dealership to buy her a new car for her birthday. Now, this ain't no Honda dealership. We sell Porsches. 17-year-olds should not be jetting Porsches for their birthday. I don't care if they made on a roll every year for their whole life. So the girl has her mind set on a 2012 Porsche Panamera 4S, which is a $100,000 400 HP Ord V8 sports saloon. The father, seeing the price tag, looks disappointed and says, "Well sweetie, I can't afford a brand new one, so why don't we get you a used one?" The used ones go for about 85-90k, have barely any miles on them, are Porsche approved certified, and come with a warranty worthy of a brand new car. She replies, "Well, it's not my fault you don't make enough money for our family. You're going to buy me a new one or I'm never speaking to you again." What really bothered me was that I could see the pain in the father's eyes when she said this. He looked genuinely hurt that he didn't make enough money. I wish I was a customer because I would have told her the fuck off. So the father said, "Alright, well, get the new one." The funny thing was he leased it and she had no idea. When they got back from the test drive, the salesman told me that the girl disrespected him and her father the entire time. When the salesman was trying to show her all the different features, she flipped out and told him, "I think I can figure it out, okay? I'm not stupid." Then on the actual test drive she did over 100 miles per hour on the highway and told the salesman to shut up when he asked her to slow down out of fear for his life. He said the father just sat there and said nothing. I have a friend that knew she had to be out of her place in a few months. No exact date, but whatever. She calls me at about 6 at night saying she has to be out of her place the next day by 1 PM or the police would be escorting her out. I should also mention she has 3 kids. Now the moving wouldn't have been such a big deal. Her problem was she hadn't found anywhere to go. I wish I could say it was due to lack of places, but it was just because she hadn't looked. So within 12 hours, I asked a different friend that she had never met if she could stay with them. Still, she got an apartment and moved her. Go a month later, she's totally screwed over my generous friends. Financially, with her attitude and her lies. I'm embarrassed and apologizing. So she finally has her own place, but because again she's not great at life, has no way to move. My friends are sick of her and drop everything, as do I, cause I feel like an ass, and move her. Where it gets bad, I noticed she didn't have a crib mattress for one of her daughters. I offer to let her use mine, because my son just got a big boy bed. She starts screaming at me saying it's hers, and how she has no friends that ever help her. I stood there in shock for about 2 seconds, told her to fuck off, and walked out of the apartment. I have a counter story, although it may sound I'm bragging, how awesome my nephew is. The last 3 years at Christmas I have tricked my nephew by disguising a good present in a bad one. The first year I got him the new COD's box game, but hid it in a box of old Dutch ketchup chips. He unwraps it and goes, "OHH ketchup, my favorite," trying so hard to not look disappointed. It took a few minutes for him to realize there was the game he wanted so bad in there. The next year I got him an iPod Touch, but in order to trick him again I did 2 things. Number 1, I gave him a cheap used boss game and made sure he unwrapped it first. It took me 2 hours to hollow out the inside of a Twilight book with an X-Acto knife. It is harder than it looks, and I kept underestimating how much to cut. Once I did, I wrapped the book up with the iPod Touch inside of the book. He opened his first, really bad like $5 used indie game at Ebb Games present and pretended to be so happy. He is such a good kid, it made me happy. I put so much effort in. 10 minutes later he opened up his Twilight book. His mom and little sister are huge Twilight fans. I had figured what's the worst thing a 14-year-old boy could get for Christmas? Twilight. He still pretended to be happy and thankful. I will never forget his words, "Oh wow, Twilight," and some pieces of paper are falling out. Side effect of the cutting pages. When his mom laughed and told him to open the book, his face lit up. It was like a firework went off in his head. 3rd year it didn't work and is boring. TL/DR, I have the best nephew on the planet. If he can pretend to be thankful for a box of ketchup chips or a Twilight book. Edit. 3rd year. My wife and I had just moved in our first place on our own. After being on our own for about 3 to 4 months, my wife's sister calls her crying. Her sister, husband and daughter had lost their home in a fire about a year prior and had been staying with some friends who were kind enough to let them stay with them. Apparently relationships had deteriorated with the friends and had to leave immediately. So we had an extra bedroom, so we decided to let them come stay with us until they got on their feet. It was supposed to only be a few weeks, but it turned into 8 months. 8 months we let them stay with us rent free. The only thing we asked them to pay was the difference in the electric bill each month, which amounted to only like $30 to $50 a month. I should mention that we were violating our lease by letting them stay with us. We hid them from our landlord for a while, but eventually she figured out we had them staying with us. Fortunately she felt sorry for them and said it was okay for them to stay a little longer. But after the 8th month she sent us a letter saying that if they weren't out in a week then we'd be in violation of our lease. So we had to ask them to go. Almost immediately after they left they deleted us off Facebook and never talked to us again. When we tried to get into contact with them to see why they were mad at us, my wife's sister claimed she was angry that we asked them to help out with the electric bill. And because of that they weren't able to buy tickets to go see A Perfect Circle. But my wife and I had bought ourselves tickets, and I even bought my little sister a ticket too, since she's never seen them live before. And apparently they were pissed at us for this. TLDR, let my wife's sister, her husband and their child live with us, rent free for 8 months. After they left they deleted us from Facebook and never talked to us again. I worked in the cell phone department at an electronics store for quite a while. When the new iPhone 4S came out I saw a lot of pretty astounding things. 16-year-old girls routinely cried because I wouldn't let them make changes to their parents' family plans or sign them up for new contracts, etc. But one of the most astounding things I ever witnessed was a man who came in with his daughter who looked to be about 14ish. The daughter was dressed in showy designer clothes from head to toe and looked, generally, like a prostitute. Her dad walked up to me and says she wants the iPhone 4S 64GB in white. I'm an avid disliker of Apple products and I saw the dad squirm when I told him that even on a brand new 3 years contract it would still be around $300, and because it was an Apple product, if he needed any warranty work done he'd have to send it away. My little corner of nowhere doesn't have an Apple store. I showed him the Samsung Galaxy S2, which was new at the time, and how it was faster, had a more durable screen, better internet capabilities, etc, etc. He called his daughter over to see the Android device and that's when the shit hit the fan. This kid starts screaming at me, "You're trying to trick my daddy into getting me this loser phone, so I'll be an outcast, you faking cunt." Needless to say, I may not have gotten the sale that day, but I did get the amusement of watching a 14-year-old girl get dragged out of the store by security. Edit. I should note that her father profusely apologized to me and handed me a crisp $20 for my trouble. This will get lost, but oh well, it's about myself. My brother is 10 years older than me, and I adored him as a kid. We had a N64 and PlayStation and I actually just loved to watch him play games. As I got older, he and my mom actually got me some kiddie games, and I loved playing. A while after the PS2 had come out, during Christmas, my brother hands me this brown paper wrapped gift tied with string. No joke. So cute, and I was so excited. I carefully untied it and unwrapped it, and it was the original PlayStation. I welled up with tears, not because I wanted a better one, but because I felt so bad for my brother, because we already had one, and maybe he forgot, and I didn't know how to tell him that I loved his gift, but it was sort of mute. It killed me, and then he said that he was just kidding, and handed me a brightly wrapped PS2. You can imagine I was floored. Flabbergasted, out of words. He explained that he just wrapped our original one as a joke. I realized minutes later that I must have looked completely ungrateful, but as a shy kid that I was, I had no idea how to explain my tears. I don't think he remembers that Christmas, but I always hope in the back of my head that either he doesn't or that he did understand why I teared up. Oh well, what can you do? Edit. I'm editing just to explain that I guess this might be a story worth hearing, in case some kids may seem like they are ungrateful, but are really just overwhelmed. So I'm a little late to the party, but this just happened recently, and I had to get this long rant out. For my apartment in the summer I pay about $600 rent to my roommate who is in control of all the bills. This is pretty expensive, and I need 2 jobs to afford it plus food, tuition, etc. Meanwhile my roommate's parents pay for all of her expenses, including a credit card in her mom's name she has for whatever other things she needs to buy. One night after rent was due, which I pay in cash, because that's how she wants it, I was the only one home and asleep when someone broke into our apartment. From what I saw, they stole a TV and box, both which belonged to my roommate. I slept through the whole robbery and had a complete meltdown when I discovered what happened. When I woke up, the people who had broken in had gone through bedrooms, which means they must have seen me sleeping. I was hysterical when I called my roommate and told her she had to come home so we could talk to the police. I told her the whole story and everything that was stolen. She ran up to her room and came back down to tell me the rent money I had given her was also stolen. She doesn't have renter's insurance, and I'm a sublet, so nothing would be reimbursed to her. Despite how upset I was, mostly frightened from being alone and asleep while our house got torn apart, she proceeded to ask me how fast I can get the rent money back to her. Her rent money that I had already paid, the rent money I work miles off to pay her in the first place and most definitely can't afford a second payment. She then goes on saying how she wants to go on a shopping spree to get the robbery off of her mind and does it. She asks for the money every day from me, knowing I can't pay it again, while she goes to the bar and blows money every night. Sorry for the rant, but sometimes that level of selfishness blows my mind. All my life, my father has dropped hints by repeating that he hadn't been to Washington DC since his junior class trip in high school, and that all he wanted more than anything was to go back and see all the new monuments that had been built since. I am not rich, but I get a lot of frequent traveler points as incentives from my work. So, I was terribly excited and proud to give my father for Christmas one year a 2-week trip to Washington DC, including VIP congressional passes, a 1-bedroom hotel suite 1-1/2 blocks from the White House, a direct flight from our city to Reagan National Airport, and car service between the airport and his hotel along with $500. Spending money, kicked in by my brother and sister, $250 each. As he opened my cleverly disguised gift-wrapped box filled with DC travel brochures, a Lonely Planet guide to touring Washington, an envelope containing 5 $100 bills, his tour itinerary on our congressman's letterhead, and including VIP attraction passes to everything from the Bureau of Engraving to the FBI headquarters building. My congressman happens to be a childhood friend who used to eat his own budgers. By the way, his hotel confirmation marked paid. He finally came to his airline tickets. With an irritated, condescending tone and scowling facial expression, he looked into my eyes and said, "That's just like you to make us sit in coach all the way from the West Coast to Washington, DC. I have only been bumped by sheer luck into first class myself 3 times in my life." I stopped trying to please or gain approval from that sadistic selfish man right then and there. Way too late to the party on this post, near 15,000 cheat, but a bit of a flip on the story. When I was younger, 12 to 14, I happened to find in my parents' room a bag with what was very obviously going to be my birthday presents, about 3 weeks away. The main thing in there was Colin McRae Racing Force Zone. I had never played or been interested in the game, so initially was like, oh, I had the choice here to discreetly voice my disappointment hoping for it to change or not. I couldn't do it though. I'm very lucky to not have come from a broken home, as probably 80% of the people I know do, and to make my parents feel bad for trying to think of a present for me, well, the guilt was setting in just from the thought. About 2 weeks out, an ad came on TV for the game. My mum and dad were there, so at the end I said, "Woo, well, that looks awesome," but I still wasn't overly convinced. Come my birthday, I get the game, act surprised and happy, and reference the time we were sitting together watching TV and the ad came on, and later that afternoon I played it. Since that time, you look at my console collection or my installed PC games, a Colin McRae or more recently a DRT game was always present. It opened me up to one of my favorite games of all time and I couldn't put the damn thing down. Happy ending for me not being a spoiled brat. TLDR, my parents knew me better than I knew myself. TLDR, my friend's family still houses her as whole ex-boyfriend, and he is an ungrateful till about it. Well, this is the thread for me. I'm sure this comment will be buried, but I need to tell this story to the internet. My friend Alana is a girl I've known since 6th grade. She always used to be really concerned about fashion and was very interested in history. Because of this, not many people liked her. Remember, this was 6th grade. In 8th grade, Alana started talking a lot about how she wasn't going to date anyone until she was 21, because then she could have a decent date and order wine. I always thought this was really cute, that she was willing to wait this long for her perfect guy. Fast forward to the summer between 9th and 10th grade. I was talking with Alana, and right before I left she said, "Oh yeah, and I'm dating Joe." To give you a bit of background, I knew the Joe she was talking about from middle school. The only reason I knew of him was because he got kicked out of our middle school for beating a kid up at a track meet. Anyway, she had been dating this guy for 6 months and hadn't told anyone. During school the next year I noticed things that make me sort of uneasy. Joe seems to take a lot of what Alana does for granted. For instance, at one point I overheard a conversation between Joe and Alana involving a Pop-Tart that Joe was eating. Alana asked for a piece of the Pop-Tart and Joe sort of laughed and said no. This went on for a little bit, until Alana asked in a very calm voice, "Joseph, why can't I have a small piece of the Pop-Tart that my parents bought, that I put in your backpack?" BS continued like this for a while. Joe's family has a lower income than Alana's, so I would often notice Joe coming to school in new clothes and things, which is all fine. There isn't anything wrong with that. The defining moment when I realized that I hated Joe with a passion is when a friend and I were over at Alana's house before a wake for the father of a friend of ours. Long story, and we were changing for it. Joe asked Alana's mom, "Hey mom, where are my shoes?" My friend and I thought that it was pretty weird that he called her mom, but we got over it. Then we proceeded to watch Joe literally beach out Alana's mom while calling her mom. I wouldn't beach out my own mom in front of company, let alone beach out someone else's mom. Almost exactly a week after they celebrated being together for 1 year, they broke up. Originally I was silently cheering, but as it turns out breaking up just means less kissing. Joe still stays over at Alana's house. My understanding is that Alana's family is literally housing him for the summer. She still buys him things. They still say they love each other. Joe still calls Alana's mom. I wouldn't normally pass judgment on him just because he does all these things, but never have I heard him say thank you to anyone unless he was kissing someone's ass. He's also a huge kisser, but that's a bit opinionated. He is the most ungrateful, manipulative prick that I know. Rant. My cousin is the most ungrateful person. My mom bought my cousin a really expensive gift for a 5-year-old. I wasn't born yet, so I don't know what it was. She opened it and tossed it aside like it was nothing. My uncle gave her a card with $5 and she jumped around the room screaming that she was rich. Her family was not well off, so my mom always had her come stay with us over the summer. My parents would always buy her the school stuff she needed and new clothes. 1 year spent $300 in clothes on her and was pissed nothing was designer. She was older than me and would get me to do things I didn't want to do by saying she would tell my parents I had done stuff I hadn't, or that she would go home. Anything to get her way. At 16 she wanted her room redone, and our aunt paid for it to be repainted, new furniture and rug to fit her room wall to wall. But she was pissed that the rug was too pink and it wasn't actual carpet installed in the room. At 18 my cousin got a car from her grandma and was pissed that it wasn't a new car. It was a 93. This was 98 with less than 70k miles. At 19 she moved into my parents' basement and only had pay $300 MO for rent. She complained it was far too much constantly. She had a car but no license, so my mom helped her get her license and she never said thank you. Bad decision giving her a license. She has totals at least 4 cars. She even went out and bought a $400 TV when she was 2 months behind on rent, and she said you have to treat yourself first. 4 years ago she moved in with our aunt, the same one who did the room for her. At $200 MO, she is still complaining about the cost of rent. Still lives there, even though she is several months behind. She bought a $1,000 TV, borrow my aunt car crashed it, hasn't paid for the damage. This list goes on. TLDR, my cousin is the most ungrateful person I know. She has literally said I owe you nothing, and you owe me everything. When I was 14 I worked as a teacher's aide for my theater's summer camps. I obviously couldn't drive yet, so my mother had to pick me up in between her work hours, which I was very grateful for. One day when class was over, we had one little girl whose parents hadn't come to get her yet. The teacher stayed with us for a few more minutes, waiting for this little girl's parents. The teacher had to get to her second job and couldn't wait anymore. It was about 20 minutes after the class had ended, so she asked if I could wait with the little girl. My mom came in the room instead of waiting in her car and waited with me with the kid. About an hour later the girl's mother finally shows up yapping away on her cell phone. She sees that the teacher is no longer there. It's just my mother and I, and she starts yelling at us because her kid can't be in the hands of people who aren't qualified, and screams at my mother saying I don't even know you. My mom starts explaining the situation as calmly as she can and tells the woman if her kid's safety is so important to her, then she should have picked her up on time. The woman grumbles about how she's going to talk to my boss and starts to leave with the kid. I stop her and tell her that she's wasted 2 hours of my mother's and my time, which neither of us would be paid for, and ask her to compensate for it. She starts screaming all over again and telling me how she's going to get me fired. I called my boss that evening and she told the woman not to bring her kid to camp anymore and that she owed my mother and I for watching her kid for those 2 hours. I felt pretty smug when I received her check. This one is my own, I'm ashamed to admit. I was 10 years old and Game Boy Color had just come out. I was a huge fan of Pokemon and all I wanted for Christmas was a Game Boy Color so that I could play the new Pokemon game in color. I begged for it. I pointed it out in the stores. I mentioned it in passing in conversation. I knew that money was tight and my parents also had my 2 younger sisters to buy for, but I believed that if they just bought the Game Boy for me, then they could also buy gifts for my little sisters. We could buy games later when money wasn't so tight. They had hinted that Santa was going to give my sisters and I a good Christmas. I took it as a confirmation that they had found the money and was able to buy me a Game Boy Color. I was so happy and excited. So, Christmas morning comes. My parents were very crafty and had bought a lot of little things to make it look like there were a lot of presents. My siblings and I said our thanks and began to divvy up the presents. Several of the boxes I got were shaped and felt very much like Game Boy boxes, game cartridges, etc. My mom and dad would ask each time I opened a present, "What do you think that is?" Well, I would shake the box, feel its dimensions, and if it felt like something Game Boy related, I would loudly and proudly call out Game Boy. Opening each of these gifts revealed some little toy that they had found, most of which I recognized from the dollar store. My mood grew darker and darker as my presents lessened in number until I was at the last gift and almost in tears. Again, they asked, "What do you think it is?" Their faces were bright and happy and promising. I took their expression and the shape and weight of the box to mean that it was the Game Boy Color I wanted. I excitedly ripped open the package to find a book, A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. I was crushed. I was visibly sad. I looked up and my parents still had that same smiling, hopeful look. I put on a fake smile and tried to act excited, but they could see right through me. My dad asks what's the matter. I don't want to hurt their feelings, so I tell them that everything was fine. He knows better, so he proves deeper. He asks, "Did we not get you something you wanted?" I look down and shake my head no. I don't want to tell the truth because I didn't want to hurt their feelings. I know they tried really hard. Dad asks again. Being 10, I knew that I had to answer or I would get in trouble. I tell them, in tears, that I wanted a Game Boy Color. They both looked sad now. They explained that Santa wasn't able to get it this time, but he tried to make up for it. Maybe we could get it for my birthday. I've ruined the mood. Everyone gets their things and begins to clean up. I still feel like crying because I knew that what I did was selfish and I still really wanted a Game Boy. To this day, I still feel like a dick. I realize now that we were too poor to afford a Game Boy and my attitude was completely uncalled for. I wish that my parents had taken the time to explain that we couldn't afford the toy and not lead me along for so long, but that's history. I've apologized several times for my actions since I've matured. It's a source of jokes now. It was Christmas and my sister and I were opening our presents. We were about 13. I wasn't sure exactly what it was, but I believe she didn't get tickets to a Broadway show she wanted to see, so she kept being handed things. She'd rip the wrapping, open them, then without a moment's pause, throw it over her shoulder and shout, "Next." I always felt bad when someone gave me something and I didn't return the favor, even as a kid. Not sure how she became a total opposite valueless spoiled cheat, but it didn't end there. In her 30s now, we all went to my folks' house for Christmas. I was there with my wife and stepson, and she had her 5 or so year old daughter, husband, and his parents. Apparently, my parents had been paying for a maid service to clean her house. She's a housemom too, and they couldn't afford it anymore. So, right there in front of my wife and teenage stepson and her little girl, she had a tantrum. A grown woman. She was screaming and crying and demanding the maid service. She not only dropped into pathetic to me from then on, but to my wife and kid too. Was a shame. Again, being raised by the same parents, not sure how I would rather give gifts than get them, and she because a spoiled, entitled cheat that acts less mature than her 5-year-old, who at one point was trying to console her. Not sure if this counts. It's more a story about refusing to let someone enjoy something and completely pissing all over their parade. But this was the first thing that popped into my head. My brother, Jake, used to be in the Marines and he stationed overseas. Jake was engaged at the time and his fiancée, Laura, was living at home with my parents. Because of different issues with her visa/the military being generally a huge headache, Laura couldn't live overseas with my brother, so my parents begrudgingly decided that she could live with us for a few months. One day, Laura mentioned that it was her 2-year anniversary of being with my brother, and she was sad that she couldn't spend it with him. My mother kind of snorted. My mom is a huge beach by the way, and made some comment about how that's the way it is, loving someone who's in the military. I'm sure you'll get used to being disappointed. Not 5 minutes later, the doorbell rang. It was a package and some flowers for Laura, from Jake. He had apparently called internationally so that he could get a local flower shop to give Laura her favorite flowers on their anniversary. He also mailed her some little presents that he knew she'd like. Laura was absolutely ecstatic. She was just so giddy and happy that she started crying. My mother, however, was completely jealous. She made Laura keep the flowers in her room because she didn't want to see them. And she kept on making little comments like it's funny that Jake never thought to send me flowers. And I'm surprised he actually even took the trouble. It probably won't happen again. She actually sent my brother an email along the lines of Laura got the flowers. I didn't realize it was possible to do that overseas. I figured if you could have, you would have sent me flowers at least once in the 6 years you've been in the military. The whole rest of the time Laura was living with us, my mother was a passive-aggressive bitch and kept on telling Laura to lose weight and making comments like, well, if you two are still planning on getting married someday. Good thing Laura has a thick skin and was just kind of like whatevs bitch. Haters gone hate. The whole time. TLDR, my sister-in-law got flowers from my brother while he was stationed overseas, and my mom was super jealous that she didn't get any flowers. I'm really late for this, so I'm sure it will get buried, but I relate to this so much. I'm the oldest of 3 sisters, 8-year difference to the youngest sister. My mom was an immigrant to America. I was the only one born back in our home country. My sisters were born inside the US and are really westernized. My younger sister is quiet and awkward, but isn't a problem at all. It's the youngest sister that is unbearable. When I was growing up we were really faking poor. My dad used to take home vegetables the day after the expiration date from the big supermarket he worked at to supplement our groceries. When I was 14 I worked and gave my entire paycheck to my parents. In my culture it's extreme respect for the parents and elders that we have to pay them back for everything. I worked 2 jobs when I was 16, one after school and one on the weekend. I paid for my own cell phone, car, insurance, driving lessons, everything. Now that my youngest sister is 17 and going to be a senior in high school, she forces my mother, who works at a large supermarket at nearly 52 hours a week in her late 50s doing hard work behind a deli counter, to do her bidding like a slave. My younger sister got into an Ivy League university about 12 hours away, and I live across the Atlantic Ocean in a whole other country with my husband. My mother is stuck living with my sister. She forced my mother to buy her a car. Now, when I moved across the pond I left my car, 2005 Mitsubishi Lancer, in perfect faking shape, for her to have. I didn't want my mother to pay for another car if I could help. She forced my mother to sell the car and buy her a brand new Honda Civic. My mother was picking up the car payments on this $30,000 car and the insurance. So I started mailing her money each month, just so she can keep up on the bills, since her and my dad are divorced, and he refuses to pay child support for adult children. I think this is where the youngest sister gets the beachiness from. She refuses to get a job. I even got her a job at my friend's dog shop. She literally had the job of just hanging out with pups all day and working a cash register. She was fired in a week because she didn't want to show up for work, and that 10 AM was too early on a Saturday to wake up. This is not even the worst of it. My husband is from England, and we got married in the States. We had been planning it for a very long time. Since we are no fuss kind of people and low key, we decided to have a small DIY ceremony and a quaint town hall in this cute middle of nowhere town we had never been before. The only expense I was going to splurge on was a photographer. I did everything myself. Hair, flowers, makeup. We both wore thrifty yet nice outfits. My dress was only about $80. My youngest sister, whose only talent is that she's a damn good photographer, heard I was going to pay $1,000 for a photographer to cover our elopement, told us that she would do it for us for free as her wedding gift to us. I told her if she couldn't do it to just tell me, even if it was the day before. We had a little ceremony date planned for a year. We flew to America for the ceremony and lo and behold, youngest sister is not there whatsoever when the day comes, even though I call her the day before, and she is excited to wear the dress that I paid for her and to photograph my wedding. I try to get in touch, she forwards my calls. I'm devastated. The day after my wedding I phone her to ask about my wedding and why she didn't show. Not even in a mean way, just more of a sad way. She went on to tell me, well, I had to go to lunch and dinner with my friends. I haven't seen them in a week and it was important. I mentioned to her, offended at this point, that she hasn't seen me in about a year. We used to be really close and she would come visit me in the city. She lives in boring suburbs. On her school breaks, when she would visit, I would take her out to go shopping and to buy things for her, and since I work in a salon, bring her into my work for some pampering. My mother said she was having problems mixing into high school at the time, so I wanted her to feel confident. She would visit me all the time and I used to take care of her like a second mom. So after I mention I haven't seen her in a year, she starts shrieking over the phone, saying I'm an ignorant beach and that life doesn't revolve around you. Then I started to cry. She tells me to shut up and that I'm weak, then asks at the end of the phone call if I can do her hair for her and her 4 friends for her senior prom for free. I just hung up the phone. This sheet isn't even the tip of the iceberg. I haven't talked to her in 10 months. I pay her cell phone bill and send my mom about $500 a month just to supplement her bills, since she's struggling really hard. Just 2 nights ago she called me crying because my sister called her a retarded cunt who can't speak English in front of all her co-workers and customers because she wouldn't give her money to buy clothes at the mall and dinner for her friends. My mom is an older tiny Asian woman who has really broken English, has no hopes of retiring. She had to dip into her retirement fund to pay for my middle sister's university tuition. I try to help as much as I can and save as much as I can, so when she needs to retire I'm gonna get her the fuck out of there and buy her a nice bungalow on the beach and pay for her bills and living expenses back in our native Asia. My sister will be in for a big shock then. She doesn't plan on college, dreams of becoming a model. TLDR, my sister is a faking cunt. My aunt and uncle are currently going through a divorce. They only had 1 child together and she just turned 16. For most of her life she was spoiled at the expense of their credit and she became a beach of a teenager because of it. When she turned 16, her parents got her a 2006 Honda Accord together despite their impending divorce and their financial issues. 2 weeks later we were all down at our family lake cabin for the 4th and my cousin was begging her mom to let her go into the nearest town to meet friends. Her mom didn't want her driving at night in the dark countryside before she had more experience. She threw a fit, saying that her mother never got her anything and that her dad would have let her go. I could tell her mom was getting really stressed and was about to just give in, so I stood up and grabbed my cousin by the shirt collar and dragged her across the yard. I pressed her face down against her new car and said really quietly, your mother never lets you do anything. She'll let you have a car on your 16th birthday. What's more, she paid for it. Now shut the fuck up and apologize. She started crying and locked herself in her room for the rest of the night. Later, when I was the last person out around the fire pit, my aunt came up and thanked me. TLDR, put her overly privileged cousin in her place when she accused her mother of never getting her anything. There is a girl at my school whom for her 16th birthday invited hundreds of people to massive convention hall like place for a sweet party. There were hundreds of people from our school there. It was a cool party and when the gift giving time was there, everyone knew what she was getting. I mean, this girl's family was loaded, and she always got what she wanted and everyone knew it. She had asked for a car for her 16th birthday, just like any teenager, and specifically wanted it to be a Bentley. But when the car finally came rolling out, it was not a Bentley, but a brand new 2011 Mercedes worth over $90,000. Instead of being extremely overjoyed and in tears of happiness due to the vastly overdone gift she had just been given, she starts bawling. She said things like, "This isn't good enough, and I didn't want this piece of shit car, I wanted a Bentley." Her dad just stood there and watched as she was freaking out over something so crazy. Never should teenage girl, first time driver, be given a Bentley, let alone a faking Mercedes-Benz. Needless to say, her father didn't cancel anything or do shit. He just apologized and appeased to her cries. I'm assuming he didn't want to embarrass himself in front of everyone he and his family knew. After the party, though, he took it back. Instead of the brand new gleaming Mercedes, he ended up giving her a used Saturn, circa 1995. It was some funny shit, because everyone hated this girl for how much of a spoiled brat she is. I wish I could have seen the look on her face when her father showed up with the Saturn, but the face, when she received a slightly lesser luxury sedan most people dream of getting, was good enough. TLDR, girl is given Mercedes instead of Bentley at her massive sweet 16, and cries about it in front of her classmates and friends. Also another story about my brother. When he was in 14, he wanted one of those nitrous powered R/C cars. My father made a deal with him. If he was able for 2 quarters to get at least a B average, he would buy him the R/C car. He did great the first quarter, pulled an A average actually. However, the second quarter he fell short by a few points. My father knew he had busted his ass and did his best, surprised him later that night with the R/C car. 1 month later we get a call at 11 o'clock from the police that they caught my brother and a few friends spray painting cars with hazard orange spray paint. My father went and picked him up, tearing him a new one the whole way home. When they got home he told him to go get him the R/C car. My brother brought it out to the living room and my father told him faking break it. His eyes flooding with tears and him letting out sobs, he choked out a no. My father told him, until you stomp it to bits, you are grounded. You go to school, you come home, you do your homework, you eat dinner, and you go to bed. Well, the prospect of having such a miserable existence didn't sound so fun to him, and crying, screaming, and wailing, he painstakingly stomped his own R/C car until the only part remaining were metal bits of the engine. After that he was told to go to bed. TLDR, my dad bought expensive nitrous powered R/C car for my brother. My brother done goofed. My dad made him stomp it into little pieces. Didn't really happen to me, but pretty much watched it happen to someone else. I work at Office Depot, and in recent times we're ridiculously understaffed, like 1 person per area even on the busiest of days. Anyways, the guy who was in tech was helping this lady for about 2 hours because she had every question known to man revved up and thrown at him about a laptop. After 2 hours, despite his constant help and being able to help the other customers who desperately needed help, probably losing more sales than he would gain with a laptop, the lady told him that she was going to buy the laptop, but was going to Walmart to make sure the price was cheaper at our store. She said she would buy it at Walmart if it was cheaper there. Anyways, about an hour later, she came back, asked about 59 more questions about the laptop, and finally decided to buy it. We pull it out of storage, and she begins to examine it for about 10 minutes. See this? What the hell is this? The box had a scratch about the size as my pinky's fingernail on it. She accused us of dropping the box, and asked for another. Luckily, we found another one, and got her the hell out of the store. She left her umbrella in the store, and it was raining heavily outside, so we hid it in the trash can. She came back in, looking intently for it, though she didn't let on that she was looking for the umbrella. She looked around the store, yelled damn it, and left in the rain, getting both herself and the laptop wet. I'm in the process of selling my house to my sister's boyfriend Patrick. She asked me to let him move in a few weeks early and live with my roommate, and because Patrick's current roommates were making his life miserable. No prob, there's a third bedroom. My roommate and I were happy to help out. Plus Patrick and my sister were talking about getting married. Future brother-in-law, of course I'll help. My sister and Patrick were currently going through a tough time. However, she had been flirting outrageously with other guys on Facebook and Skype, and talked briefly about cheating on Patrick with a military friend that was returning in a week from being stationed in Germany. Patrick and my sister worked through their problems, but were still a little unstable as a couple. They put off having her move with him into the house I was selling him. One night when my boyfriend came to visit me from out of town, Patrick and my sister had another huge fight. My boyfriend and I talked to him, calmed him down, and convinced him to give my sister the benefit of the doubt. She accused me of cheating with Patrick, apparently in front of my boyfriend, and being a selfish, terrible sister, she forbade Patrick to help me haul my bed and dresser to my new apartment in a different city. A month later, she cheated on him. Whoops. TLDR. Cheating sister attacks my integrity after I convinced her boyfriend not to break up with her. She's a dumb hoe. I've got a good one. It's not about someone receiving something and being ungrateful, but this happened about 11 years ago and it still sticks out in my mind. Attended a very elite K-12 private school from K-12. I have seen some snooty shit go down in my days within those gates. My parents did a good job of keeping me grounded despite sometimes wanting to get an attitude. My parents are upper middle class, but we never had houses in other places / super expensive cars / didn't take many vacations. I can't say the same for other millionaires / billionaires kids I went to school with. We had a lock-in type thing at my school where we spent the night in the gyms, and the school basically put on a huge rave in the big gym. I remember some kids getting busted for taking E. This was in middle school, but I digress. The next morning, when our parents came to pick us up, this one girl, Jordan, proceeds to throw a huge fit in front of the entire school out by the curb where we were getting picked up. Apparently, since her father had the audacity to pick her up in his red Ferrari, she was embarrassed and was screaming at him that she refused to get in the car with him. The entire school watched this girl scream at her father, telling him to go home and get another one of their cars, presumably their Lexus, since that's what her mom always picked her up in. I mean, that tantrum has stuck with everyone for 11 years now. We joke about it all the faking time, but now that I'm out on my own in more of the real world, it seems faking ridiculous that someone would ever throw a fit because of that. We were all like, well, shit, if she doesn't want to get in, I sure will. This will probably get buried, but oh well. So a year or two ago I was dating this girl who I thought was the love of my life. Thank God I dodged that bullet. Anyway, I live in Dallas and she lived in Houston. I drove down every 2 weeks, making myself broke as hell, in a Jeep Cherokee with 326,000 miles on it. Not once did she thank me or appreciate it. Now fast forward, I give up my nice apartment and go $3,000 into debt to break a lease, to move into a cheaper place, to have more money to spend on her and such. This is the good part. For our anniversary, I somehow managed to reserve a suite on the top of a mountain in Arkansas. I stress and plan on this for 2 months to make it perfect. I check the weather to make sure we can go. Well, her job ends up making it so we can't go because she has to work. So I call our boss. We worked for the same company, who I'm close to, and she pulls some strings to get it so we can go again. I call this beach and tell her the good news, and instead of being overjoyed that her man saved the day and is now whisking her away on a romantic getaway at a $300 a night suite, she flips sheet and calls me an asshole and inconsiderate. Any other girl would have sheet herself to go on this trip. TLDR. Gave more than I could to a cunt who didn't deserve it, and she ruined a really great trip cause I cancelled it. On another note, I have a polar opposite girl who is the love of my life now. She appreciates everything in life and it's one of her best qualities. We are poor right now, and she doesn't have insurance, but really awful vision. Can't see a damn thing. I got an Amazon local coupon for a $50 eye exam by a great doctor. We get her checkout, and he gives us a $130 off her glasses. I couldn't afford the anti-glare and polycarbonate he suggested, so we had to go with cheaper frames and plastic lens with no anti-glare. I felt terrible because I wanted to get her the best, but she made me feel like a hero and loved me for getting her those bottom end glasses. I spent $110 total to get her to see, and she acts like I spent $1,000 then built the glasses myself. TLDR. Have a wonderful girl now who would smile if I gave her my half-eaten sandwich from lunch yesterday. I had this really good friend named Kat once upon a time. Kat and I were best friends for about a year and a half, and then we got in a drunken dispute at a party. It was both of our faults, and stopped talking, though we never said ill of each other during that time of separation. Well, she contacted me 8 months later telling me she wanted to go out to lunch and mend our friendship. I agreed to go, and we ended up mending our friendship, and I was happy. She was always mentioning her family problems. Her mother's boyfriend was a cheating, abusive asshole who got the mother pregnant. It was a mess. Needless to say, Kat and her mother's boyfriend did not get along, and Kat was always looking for somewhere to go. My dad owns a 4-house apartment complex, which he built almost completely on his own, and she was hinting pretty heavy that she wanted me to talk to him about her moving into one of those townhouses. What do? I make the idiot's decision and bite the hook. I offered to talk to my dad, and she was ecstatic. Amazingly, my dad agreed to let the two of us move in for very low rent on no contract, and we were moved in by last June, 1 year and 1 month ago. She ended up bringing another girl to move in with us, a person I have never known very well, because they became BF4Ls during our separation. My dad didn't like the idea, neither did I, really, but he allowed it when she persisted and said they were going to share a room. What ensued was probably the worst 9 months of my life. To keep it brief, here are some things she did that were obviously not okay. Stole and destroyed several of my things, had loud sex in our living room and practically moved her boyfriend in there with us too, had loud, long parties on weeknights when I and the neighbors had work and school. Refused to discuss any issue I tried to bring up. She would go crazy, deny everything and scream and cry, and be passive aggressive for weeks afterwards. Ate expensive food I bought specifically for my special diet that I told her not to eat, and let her friends eat my food. Let her friends come over and be rude and disrespectful to me, and other things. We evicted her this past March after she was particularly nasty to me one night, and I haven't heard from her since. Unfortunately, I also haven't heard from a lot of the cool people I used to hang out with who were more her friends. Who knows what she told them about me. Luckily my closer friends didn't bail on me because they witnessed a lot of the atrocities she brought upon that house. They actually still tried to be her friend too, which was cool with me, but she shunned them too, even though they had absolutely no part in our dispute. TLDR, she took advantage of me and my dad, and then destroyed our house. Turned a bunch of our friends against me and made my life a living hell. She had the nerve to tell me I was in the wrong. She never even thanked me. We are still cleaning up the unit she and her friend moved out of in March. My sister is a beach, and not just any beach. She's the type who believes that everyone is out to get her whenever something goes wrong. This past year I came back to my house from college for Christmas break to spend time with my parents. They had just moved from the house I was basically born in, so this was my first Christmas ever not living in that house, and it kinda stressed me out for some reason. My parents and I spent the day watching movies and the usual holiday routine until my sister and her boyfriend arrived to open some presents and exchange cards. Now, since we had just moved, we had changed our mailing address and taken out our old mailbox because we had no further use for it. However, my sister informs us that she had used our old house as her mailing address for her work check that was supposed to come the next day. Since there was no mailbox to deliver to anymore, she'd have to wait a few days or something to pick it up somewhere else. She got mad pissed, and my sister is really good at making people feel bad. As my mom handed her a bag with some gifts for her and her boyfriend, she started yelling, stating that everything would be ruined for her because she couldn't get her check, and that my mom did it on purpose because she hates her and loves me. I'm the younger of two. This argument has been beaten to death. Now I'm gonna have to wait until Monday to get my check. I hope you're happy, you stupid beach. My mom just kinda stands there and takes it, and even my dad stayed silent. I'm the kind of guy who avoids confrontation like the plague. I hate fighting and arguing, when not in jest, but I'd seen enough. I turned to her and flatly stated, "Why do you always do this shit? Whenever there's a holiday or something you always have to find the one thing that doesn't go perfect and blow it into some huge deal." My sister and I hadn't talked since I was in high school, so she was a little shocked that I was so brazen with her, but she bounced back. She put her face about 2 inches from mine and screamed at me for a solid 10 minutes claiming I had not right to speak like that because I didn't know what it was like to be in her shoes. I'm spoiled. I'm stupid. I'm entitled. The list goes on. I went stone-faced through her whole rant until she eventually stormed out the front door with her boyfriend in tow. As she got in her car I opened the front door and yelled her name. As she looked at me, I made the biggest least sheet-eating grin and chimed "Merry Christmas," which sent her into another tirade. Afterwards, she removed me on Facebook and only requested me again on my 20th birthday. TLDR gave my sister presents on Christmas and was awarded a massive tongue lashing. So on Christmas my husband and I were up at my parents' house visiting. My parents were in a financial bind at the moment, and my sister who is 16 kept bugging them that she wanted the new iPod Touch. She has continuously received one for Christmas or her birthday since 2008 because she keep breaking them due to her lack of respect for her own property let alone others. So when it comes time to open presents she tears through them without waiting for everyone. She got some really nice gifts too, like some good basketball shoes, Nike Air Maximum $85, and some nice clothing, basically stuff that she needed. She then proceeds to cry and throw a tantrum because she did not get the iPod. She had a perfectly good working one that had a small crack in it at the time. Later the next month I came back up to visit my parents and my sister and some of my friends. I brought an iPod with me that my husband and I received as a gift from a former roommate who already had one, and it just so happened to be the one my sister wanted. When I went back home I could not find it anywhere. I always kept it in my zippered pocket of my purse. So we just assumed it was in our van or in my old room at my parents' house. One of the next times we went up my sister got into a huge fight with my mom and she had to give her her phone and her iPod. My mom, who knows very little about electronics, came to me and my husband to ask if this was what she had asked for. We both took one look at it and knew it was ours. I told my mom and my dad, and they called her to the living room. She walks in listening to her own iPod and claims she found our iPod in the basement. As funny as it sounds, I'm still terrified of my parents' basement, so I will never go down there without a good reason, which of itself is very rare. She still has yet to get in trouble for stealing our property. Note, when she gave the iPod to my mom the screen was completely busted up beyond use and wouldn't turn on, even when it was hooked up to my laptop. Also she had written her name in Sharpie all over the back. The only way we could tell it was ours was from a patch of sticker residue that matched one of those special sticker that you find in a bakery. I was working at a bakery at the time. This all took place back in February and my parents have still yet to punish her for all the BS that happened back then. I'm waiting to talk to my parents again about this until after they have finished with their move. We do have the iPod in our possession. One of my old roommates was the worst human I've ever met. Pathological liar, thief, narcissist / sociopath, levels of unconcern with other humans, and animal abuser. The last is how I got my cat, because I took him away from her. The cat stuff makes me the most furious, so I'll put it last. But first, some random examples of her being specifically ungrateful, rather than simply faking psycho. The living room had my DVD player hooked up to her TV, and I nailed up a wall shelf there for my DVDs. I told her she could watch my DVDs if she took care of them, but I kept finding them piled on top of the DVD player instead of put back in their cases. I finally flipped my sheet when I found she'd unwrapped my unopened DVD and then left it dropped on the dusty floor where it got scratched up. So I grabbed my DVD player and started scooping up my DVDs to put in my room where she couldn't reach them. I went back for another armload and found she'd started arranging her DVDs on my empty shelf. Well, I thought since you weren't going to use it, you think I'm that faking nice? When I moved in, all of the monthly utilities were in her name and she refused to put my name on any of the accounts. I discovered this was because she'd take my checks for my utility half and spend them on her credit cards, waiting to pay the utilities until the third or fourth final notice left us days from getting electricity or water shut off. She tried to make me pay half the late fees. I started using the account numbers to pay my half by phone, and she threw sheet fits because I was invading her privacy. Now the cat stuff, which still makes my blood boil. She neglected her cat by letting his water run completely dry, only feeding him when she remembered, leaving his litter box for weeks until he was literally pawing through his own sheet, etc. When I took over his care, even though I was broke, because I couldn't stand it anymore, she yelled at me for buying cheap food and litter instead of the organic stuff she liked. She refused to get the cat vaccinated because it's too expensive, while buying a new iPad and 3 to 5 bottles of wine a week, but she'd let him go outside to play with feral cats because it was easier than giving him exercise inside. I finally took him to a low-cost vaccine clinic because I didn't want to get rabies, and she refused to pay because she didn't give me permission. From going outside, the cat eventually got worms, which I didn't notice. They didn't show up in his litter box until he got really skinny. When I told the roommate, she freaked out, yelling to not let him near her so he couldn't infect her, but she insisted I take her with him to the vet the next day. But when I knocked on her door the next day, she refused to come because she was hungover. I drove the cat an hour both ways to a low-cost clinic and waited another 2 hours to get him medicine, and she again refused to pay because the worms weren't that bad. He'd lost so much weight you could see his ribs. This is not all the terrible shit she did, but this comment is already too long, so TLDR, beach queen of the world abuses/neglects her cat, then yells at me or refuses to pay me back when I take care of him instead. I eventually made her turn the cat over to me. The cat is now my cat, sleeping happily on my bed, and we will never see the beach queen again. Recently my family, mom, dad, my younger sister and I went to the British Virgin Islands for several days on a vacation. This was our first time as a family going somewhere tropical, and was the only vacation my mom could afford to take as her job is pretty demanding. My dad has a more flexible schedule with his company and also had frequent flyer miles from business trips that we're able to use, so we are all excited that there is enough money and time for everyone to relax on a beautiful tropical island. Except my sister. She is 16 and has driven my parents mad since the terrible toss, which just escalated into being an all-around beach during the following 14 years of her life. First, she's put off because she wanted to go to England instead of a destination of pure beauty and paradise. When we get there, she takes several pictures on the beach of me, herself, and my mom. Dad isn't Facebook material. She spends one day with us and then decides that she hates it here and wants to go home. The next several days she holds herself up in the beachside hotel room with my dad's computer and refuses to do anything. Refuses to go look at the incredible nature park. Refuses on 3 occasions to go snorkeling, even the $400 excursion we had prepaid for. Refuses to even eat until we bought some fruit crackers and put them in the room for her. Is obviously not taking her medication. Just sleeps, goes on Facebook, and watches TV. Whenever someone would even look at her, she would dissolve into a screaming fit and rock back and forth on the bed, hysterically crying, repeatedly yelling how much she hates our parents, how much she hates everyone, how incredibly awful we all are for forcing her to come to this place she hates so much. She purposely deprives herself of food, medication, and reason, and screamed louder the more we tried to comfort her, driving herself into hysterics on purpose, without reason. The sound of my dad's voice persuading her to tell us what's wrong was drowned out by her wailing on and on about how she hates him and will hate him forever. In daily life she is just as much a brat and has never changed since her screaming fits as a 2-year-old. In all honesty, I really do not feel love for her, and I don't think I ever will. She has verbally abused my parents for years, and I could never love someone who causes so much pain to my mom and dad. Seeing their eyes as they walk away from her, always defeated, makes my blood boil, yet I can barely do anything except comfort them, because I'm only her sister, not a parent. This vacation is just one of many times she has ruined an outing and crushed my parents' hearts, and I can't wait until she moves out so they can live without daily abuse from her cold, shriveled heart. When the Nintendo Wii came out, I really wanted one badly. I loved my GamerCube to death, so naturally I would love the successor. I would later find out that I didn't like the Wii and eventually got $100, but that's for a later tale. From its release date in November 6th through mid-January, I had constantly been calling stores to check on stock to see if anybody had them. Nobody ever did. I lived about 20 miles from the nearest store and I was 14, so I couldn't drive and would have to guarantee I would get a Wii in order for them to agree to drive me. Mid-January, I lucked out, kind of. There was a blunder on a Saturday where I called a Circuit City. They said they had 20 or so Wii Ice. I drove there and they had never had Wii Ice. The person I talked to on the phone didn't give me the right information and my mom was pretty pissed. However, I found out that the Target there was getting a shipment the next day. You had to be in line by 7 AM and they would hand out vouchers to everyone in line until they ran out of vouchers. The voucher would guarantee you a Wii if you bought it that day. We had lined up at about 6 and at 7 the vouchers were handed out. There were 19 people in line, I think, and there were 20 some vouchers. They let me take a second voucher. My idea was to keep one Wii and sell the other on eBay for about $500. That's what they were going for at the time. About 5 minutes after they handed out the vouchers, the employee was still hanging out near the door outside, and my family and I were in the car. I saw a middle-aged lady, probably had children, approach the employee to ask for a voucher, but there were none left because a few people, including myself, took extras. I saw that she didn't get a voucher. I left the car, walked over to her, and gave her my extra one. She didn't say a word. She didn't say thank you. She didn't look happy. Nothing. She had a blank expressionless face. She didn't even look me in the eyes. She just took it and walked away. The stupid ungrateful bitch cost me $500. To add to the pain, when I was picking up my Wii, when the store opened, a father with his 3 kids came in looking to buy one. They didn't know that they needed a voucher, so the Wii were sold out. I wish I had never given that voucher to the lady so that I could have saved it for this dad. His kids were really bummed about it, and I'm sure they would have all been grateful. I should make an alt called understands not condones or something. Here's how I think this goes inside their messed up heads. It's a mixture of the reality conflict of not getting what they expected, coupled with the unsuppressed evolutionary desire to be as high up the social ladder as possible. Imagine it goes like this. They've been looking forwards to their birthday, playing it over and over in their minds about what amazing presents they'll get. Presents they can't afford for themselves, but are as exciting and amazing as the gifts they remembered as a child. Of course, it's a lot easier to impress a child than a teen, and likely cheaper too. They've spun this perfect fantasy of how it'll all go down. How gracious and grateful they'll be when all their dreams come true. How it'll be just the right thing. Beautiful and perfect. And amazing and envy generating. Did I mention it'll be perfect? Then reality comes along. People actually have jobs, bills, debts, lives, and surprisingly, even if they were made of money, they don't have a mind-reading hat to know what the birthday girl/boy had imagined in their perfect dream. Also, asking them what they want isn't an option either, because that would cheapen the dream. Part of the dream is that they are so pleasantly surprised, after all. So, they don't get the dream. It can be anything that goes wrong. They got the wrong color car, they got the same amount of money as a sibling, and thus, not a surprise, they got a used laptop instead of a new one. They jewelry instead of books, they got games that they didn't want. Anything. First, there's a brief moment of being stunned. They had imagined their perfect birthday so strongly that they had believed that it was obviously going to be reality. The shock hits them. Then they are disappointed. Obviously, nothing can compare to their perfect wish vision of the day, so anything will be a disappointment. At this point, they'll either cry or rant, shock and disappointment combined. Reality has slapped them in the face, and man if they don't like it. There are 2 ways they can solve this in the future, the bad way and the good way. The bad way is learning to suppress that disappointment and hiding it behind false gratitude until they've left, then shoving the present in a cupboard and having a good cry or fume. This is what the ops niece has just learned how to do. The good way is not to set such improbably high expectations. Instead, to look forward to a birthday as a time to see relatives, look back on the year, and if any presents at all are given, to see them as a pleasant bonus and not the main focus of the day. The social ladder aspect is where the dream of their birthday is fueled by the need to look as wealthy as possible, to maintain their social standing in their group. It doesn't matter how poor the givers are, they'll always want something that signifies how important they are within their group. Status objects or signifiers. If their friends are getting cars, they need the better car. If their friends are going on vacation, they need a more expensive vacation. If their friends are getting clothing, they need to have the more exclusive clothes. Then they need to be ungrateful about it, to show that it's no big thing, to further cement how wealthy and influential they are. The way to fix this is to find a group of friends that don't measure social standing by wealth, or learn to be content with a social standing that's middle of the group, or even below. That can be very stressful, as anyone who's been the poor kid as a kid/teen can understand. When I was 11, my parents told me that if I do every single last chore in the house they would buy me a used Nintendo 64, so I did, scooping kitty litter, doing dishes, and even unclogging the toilet, and 1 week later my parents got me a Nintendo 64. A few days later I go into my room to see that my brother was playing it, being the nice sibling that I might say he can play as long as he takes care of it while I'm at camp. I was a Boy Scout. I continue going through camp and things were going pretty good. When I get back I go up to my room to see the N64 split in half along with the games that I bought. There were chunks of controllers everywhere, and the cable was gone, and the TV that I had bought at the time had a huge hole in it. I run to my brother's room and start yelling at him for breaking my stuff, and this is, and I quote what he said, "If you pay me and do my chores and cheat for a month I'll buy you a new one." I continue to yell at him and he says, "Chill bro, just buy a new one." Then I was furious, and I continue yelling at him, and this is what happened next. I walk over to his sheety and near broken SNES and break it with a hammer. My older brother then runs downstairs crying and screaming, "He broke it, he broke it." My parents told me that my violence was not tolerated, and they took all my money to buy my brother a brand new Nintendo 64. While at the store my brother was yelling and calling me a filthy hoe and a slut. At the time I didn't know what those words meant. 2 years later, on my brother's birthday, when the new GameCube came out, my brother smashed the N64, blamed me, and my parents bought him a new GamerCube and a new TV way to play favorites mom and dad. My story isn't about gifts, more about money. I would do these really long mascot gigs for a local bank, baking in the summertime, because the suit is all fur and 100+ degrees. I pay rent, food, and my own bills. I live at home currently. Anyways, I do a few gigs working my ass off. They normally pay $25.00 an hour. I wait 2 weeks to get my paycheck from the bank via mail and nothing shows up. Finally I'm getting really pissed as I then wait another 2 weeks, which is unheard of, for this check to be sent to me. I called the bank and they said it was sent 2 weeks ago for sure, with date and everything. So I question my mom and dad, asking if they have seen my check, that I believe the mail lost it, and that I need to just call the bank and have the check cancelled. They told me they haven't seen it and that they would keep an eye on it. I then go outside to make the phone call when my mom steps outside with me. She goes, "Well, you got your check a few weeks ago, here's a stub for it." It was for $250 at the time, and I was like, okay, who spent my money? She then backfires on me, saying I don't do anything around the house chore-wise and barely pay rent on time. I then told her that's considered fraud, that she stole my check and cashed it without my knowledge. She's done this like 3 times before. I always pay on time and always have cash on me. It's total bullshit. A few years ago I was dating this one girl. Now I live in a pretty wealthy area, but this girl was loaded. Her dad was an executive of some type of oil company, and he had to be bringing home over 400k in just salary. Despite all the nice things they had, she seemed pretty down to earth and realized, or so I thought, how fortunate she was. They lived in a mansion, had about 7 cars, all highly expensive like Lamborghinis, Mercedes, Aston Martins, and even some type of rare Bentley displayed in a room in their house, and they took lavish vacations. Anyway, she was 16 and was using her dad's old Mercedes S600. By old, it was a couple months old. Since he never drove it as much as he'd like, he let her use it for the time being. She was supposed to be getting her own car that she picked out in a few months, since they were going to special order it. But one day she called me crying. I tried to calm her down, and once she settled down enough to make complete sentences, I wanted to slap her. Apparently her dad thought she loved the Mercedes and decided to transfer it to her, but she wasn't having any of that. Apparently she wanted a new BMW 7 Series, but her dad basically said she's lucky she got the Mercedes and the BMW will have to wait a couple of years. Anyway, she went hysterical for the next week or two and was impossible to deal with. Eventually I broke up with her because I can't believe who would act like that. Found out her dad finally gave in and ordered her a brand new 750 Li about a month later. Some kids faking suck. TLDR. 16-year-old ex got her dad's slightly used Mercedes S-Class, wanted a BMW 7 Series, and threw a tantrum. Okay, I have a good one. This happened last year. My 13-year-old cousin's birthday was coming up, and I wanted to get her something really special for her birthday. Well, she is completely spoiled like a lot of kids in the nation are. Well, anyways, at the time I was 15. Of course I'm 16 now. And I was still doing jobs for neighbors that I had been doing for them since I was probably about 8. Anyways, I had basically started this company around my neighborhood, and I was earning a lot of money. Well, I had saved up a lot of money from working for about a year and I wasn't sure where to spend it, so I decided I would think about what my cousin has been talking about. I remembered her blabbing on about getting an iPhone, so I decided that was what I would spend my money on. I talked it through with her parents and they agreed to accept the phone and pay the data plan, since my cousin needed a new phone anyways, because her was getting very old. Well, I didn't have the $800 to buy the 32GB iPhone 4 that she wanted, so I got her an iPhone 3. I can't remember how many gigabytes it had though. Well, fast forward to her birthday. I couldn't sit still because I expected that she would be so happy to get an iPhone. She eventually unwrapped my present. At first she was excited, but then she looked and saw it was an iPhone 3 and her face went blank. She screamed bold, "I can't believe you didn't get me the new iPhone. You faking suck." Well, I was so pissed about it, but I just said okay and walked out. The next day, she called me to apologize, but the way she said it gave away that her parents made her do it. Yeah, I'm not getting anything this year. Please note, I'm a girl who used to like her cousin. This was my first experience with complete injustice. It was probably 4th grade near the end of the year and the teacher was handing out bags of candy to the good students as achievement awards or something. After the gathering and distribution of bags, one of the students' candy bags goes missing. As anyone who's been in a situation where something goes missing in an elementary school classroom knows, the next step was to have everyone check their own backpacks and desks. Also, this whole thing was at the absolute end of the day, so the missing candy meant we had to stay longer. I, using my superior intellect, read, common sense, already know that it is not in my backpack or desk. Everyone else checks their bags and desks, while I do a speed walk loop of the classroom, which mostly consisted of open surfaces and cubby holes. So it's not like anyone would have had to put much effort into it. Probably 4 seconds into the search I found the missing bag under a crafts table maybe a yard away from where this whole awards thing was held. I go to the girl who had lost it and hand it to her. The teacher then grabs me by the ear and drags me out of the classroom and starts screaming at me about how much of a little shit I was and how terrible I made that girl feel because apparently I was the one who stole the candy. She threatened to send me to the principal's office. I tried to make my case, but sadly I wasn't as articulate then as I'm now. TLDR, got in trouble for being the hero. This is opposite of the topic. My family is tight with money right now. I don't like the idea of getting gifts that much. I prefer getting a nice cheap stuffed animal over expensive stuff. I usually earn my gifts or presents through my hard work at school. My mom tries to buy me things which I don't really need. I would rather have her use the money to pay for bills. Saving up on my little sister's birthday party. She never had a real one, or fixing her car. I will go along with it, so I won't make her sad. Though my guilty face is easy to read, and she will return it. In 6th grade I had received the President's Education Award for academic excellence. My parents were really proud, and they wanted to reward me. At the same time my sister had just bought an iPod Touch with her babysitting money. My parents scraped together $150 to give to me for almost whatever I want. I was astonished by the gift. They told to think over what I had wanted to use the money for. Originally I wanted a little cheap prepaid phone. Though my parent talked me out of that idea. My MP3 that I had gotten from Christmas had broke months earlier, and I was using a $5 MP3 that was pretty good at the time. My parents convinced me to get an iPod like my sister. Every day my dad will give me some money, so I can buy the iPod quickly. Within a week I was able to buy it. I took real good care of it. I would have a breakdown if I had thought I lost it, since I know my parents will be mad at me. One day it fell from my jean pockets at school and I couldn't find it. I had a huge breakdown which led to a panic attack. Some teachers helped me look for it, and I even tried filing a report. Couldn't, though the lady was being beachy about, though a vice principal kindly filled it out for me. When I went home I told my parents what had happened. They were disappointed but not mad. At the time I had saved about $35 to attend a concert. Tickets were $17 in advance. My parents had decided I can get a replacement, but I will have to chip in. I immediately gave them my $35 and my future allowance. I did not complain about paying for some of it at all. It took about a month and a week to get my new one. Earlier my sister had updated and got the iTouch 4. I had waited patiently and soon I was able to get my new one. When I got it, I immediately saved the product number and later activated the Find My iPhone/iPod feature. My father then surprised me when he told me to buy the tickets to the concert I had wanted to attend. Out of my siblings I had attended the cheapest concert my parents paid for. I was shocked, but my dad said it was coming from my allowance and this can be an early Christmas birthday gift. My parents know it's hard to give me presents, and they advantage when I really want something. I'm still very grateful for both the tickets and the iPod. I didn't throw a tantrum when I had to pitch in money unlike other kids. My husband and I saved up and bought a Wii a few months after we got married 4 years ago. When we visited his family, they live several states away. That Christmas, we brought our Wii and games with us so his sisters, 17 and 13 at the time, could play it. The 17-year-old hogged it the entire time, playing it no less than 8 hours per day for the week that we were visiting, and she was extremely rough on the discs and remotes. She ran down the batteries just before we left, and then didn't replace them, or say anything about it. After we'd gone home, she then decided that she had to have a Wii. Never mind that she had just gotten an iPhone and an iPod just a few days before for Christmas, and her birthday was months away, and threw a tantrum so that her parents would get one for her, not the family, but for her. They did. She was completely ungrateful and wouldn't let anyone else play it, including her sister. Around that time, the 13-year-old developed a heart condition that sent her to the ER a couple of times. Her doctor decided she needed to wear a heart monitor, which was mailed to their home. The 17-year-old was home when the package arrived. She furiously tore it open, automatically assuming that her parents had bought a Wii Fit for her to go with the Wii that she had just gotten for absolutely no reason. When she saw that the package contained her sister's medical device and not a Wii Fit, she flung the package and the heart monitor it contained to the other side of the room. When my daughter was 6 years old, she is 10 now, she did something that swelled my chest with pride. I was about 3 months pregnant with my second child and had just recently lost my job, so that Christmas was going to be a tight one. My daughter and I went to Walmart with a friend of mine, her husband, and her kid that was also 6. After walking around for a little while, we passed by the toy section and the kids asked if they could look at the toys, and we said yes. To make a long story short, my friend's kid started screaming and crying and throwing a major tantrum over some toys he wanted to get right then and there. His mom tried talking to him saying that Santa is not going to like his behavior, when all of a sudden my daughter says to him very sweetly and matter of fact, "Antonio, if you keep acting like that, Santa is not going to bring you anything. You should not cry like this and make your parents feel bad. Don't you know that parents don't always have money to buy you the things you want, even if they want to? Your mom and your dad work very hard to pay for your house and buy food, and when they can, they get you toys to make you happy. If you really want something really bad, you should save money in your piggy bank and then you can get it yourself, or be a good boy and Santa will get it for you." Needless to say, my friend, her husband, and I were just standing there with our mouths wide open, just not believing we heard all this from a 6-year-old girl. In the end, my friend and her husband got my daughter a toy. I would have too, but did not have any money, and their kid got grounded for acting the way he did at the store. Reading these stories makes me so grateful for my kids. They are just regular kids that drive me crazy on a daily basis, but they are very sweet and thoughtful too. I love them so much. It was a few weeks before Christmas, and I was 8 years old. I found a nice remote controlled car in a catalog and told my parents I would like that as a Christmas present. My mom said, "We won't be able to get that, my darling. We can't afford it." Cue infantile depression and anger. That night I was brooding in my room and I wrote "fuck you, mom" on a piece of paper and threw it in the bin. She found it the following morning when emptying the bin. Just wait until your father hears about this. My dad had already left for work that morning. I had never felt so scared. That evening, I was lying in the bath and I heard my dad come home from work. I probably lay in the bath for an hour, too scared to come out of the bathroom. Later, my mom came to my room and asked me to come into the kitchen. My dad was waiting there. They shouted at me for a few minutes, then my dad smacked me hard, hand only, no belt or anything. I went back to my room, sobbing. The next few weeks leading up to Christmas were difficult. I felt awful. On Christmas Day, my parents didn't give me a present. More tears. The whole day was awkward, as I knew all the relatives were aware what a brat I had been. I couldn't wait for it to be over. I spent most of the day in my room by myself. Those few weeks of suffering felt like an eternity to an 8-year-old. To this day, I'm grateful for the experience. I feel compelled to share my story. Unfortunately, the horrible person in my story is me. When I was about 4 years old, I had been asking my parents for a toy car. They said I would have to wait for my birthday if I really wanted it. I was pouty but understood. That was the way of things. Then, about a week before my birthday, my parents surprised me by giving me a gift when I got home from playing at a friend's house. I was so excited as I tore open the wrapping paper. At first, elation was all I could feel as I recognized the packaging the car comes in. My excitement built as the last of the paper was removed. And then shock, sadness, anger, betrayal. It was blue. I told them time and time again, "Red. I want the red one." I threw the toy, still in its packaging, on the ground and began screaming and crying. I wanted the red one. I wanted the red one. This went on for a couple minutes until my father couldn't take it anymore. He calmly picked me up and carried me to my bedroom, where I then received my first azupin, as he used to call it. When that was over, he sternly explained to me what it means to receive a gift, especially one given in thoughtful generosity. Thanks and gratitude is all you should ever feel in a situation like that, and if you're feeling anything different, then you're missing the point. Even if it's something you don't want or need, make the best of it. As further punishment, the toy was taken back to the store, and I had to have peas for dinner. That was one of my first vivid memories, and from that day, that lesson stuck with me. Surprise twist. A week later at my birthday, I received 4 of the red cars that I had been asking for. Apparently I wouldn't shut the fuck up about them. TLDR, pouty 4-year-old me gets an azupin. I'm a social worker and used to distribute Section 8 vouchers, which, for those who don't know, are like the Cadillac of public assistance programs. Having a voucher gives you a very cheap rent for the rest of your life, if need be, anywhere in the US. You do have to live in Section 8 licensed properties, which are the same as any apartment. The owner has just done the paperwork to fulfill the requirements. These are generally nice places as they have to meet specific requirements as determined by the state. So, we would only get like 2 or 3 of these vouchers for a casa load of around 50 clients, and had to choose the folks with a combination of the most desperate need and the most treatment compliance. Thing is, once you are given a voucher you must use it in 60 days, or it becomes inactive, which I know is stupid, but anyways, that is the way it is now. Inactive voucher cannot be reapplied to another client and is lost. So I choose to give the voucher to this client, who is sleeping on the couch with her family, and now I have to find a place for her. I finally find a place within walking distance to her family and the time is running out. So she goes to check it out and comes back to me and says she can't take it because my big screen TV can't fit up the steps to the place. Facepalm. So, unfortunately, she lost the voucher and that was that. After all the work I did trying to get this lady into a safe environment, I wasn't very happy. Oh my goodness, do I have a car story? Sorta long though. TLDR, my niece threatens to leave home over a donut, makes my sister's life hell. Background, my older sister is 40ish, has a great job, a college degree, and lives in a rich part of the local city with her husband and daughter. My sister catches her husband cheating, and the whole thing ends in divorce. After about 20 years of marriage, joint custody is awarded to both parties for my niece. My sister remarries a really wonderful man with 2 daughters. Fast forward to this past May. The morning of her birthday she wakes up and erupts with anger because her sister, daughter of my sister's new husband, ate a donut that she was saving from the night before. I shit you not, and she threatens to leave for her dad's for it. For my niece's birthday, her dad bought her a really nice used Audi A6, I think a 2005 model. Really sharp car. At the same time, my sister decides to trade her BMW, which has given her lots of problems, and she happens to get a great deal on a similar Audi A6, but a 2010 model. My niece flips out, demanding my sister take the Audi she got back, because she only got it to make my car look like crap, my niece says. The following day, she says she doesn't want to go to school, 16 years old, and when she gets there, she calls her stepmom, dad's wife, to get her, saying she never wanted to stay at her mom's again. She then wrote a letter to present in court stating my mom neglects me and my needs and does not provide a home environment in hopes of being able to stay with her dad full time, who gives her all she wants. She's the most ungrateful person I've ever met. My father is a police officer and once got a call from my aunt because she got a ticket from another officer in the same department he works at. My dad hates it when people call him to try and get out of tickets, but my aunt kept nagging him about it, so he went ahead and called the other officer that wrote my aunt the ticket and explained to her that was his sister-in-law she had written the ticket to. The other officer said she would throw the ticket out. She was in no way obligated to do this and could have actually gotten in trouble for doing it, but went ahead and did it just to be nice. My aunt responds to this by thanking neither of them and then calling the officer that wrote her the ticket a nigger and Aunt Jemima. The ticket would have been $150 for making a left turn in an area with 3 large signs saying no left turns. Long story short, my dad now says that if my aunt or anyone else ever gets a ticket they won't be getting any help at all from him. TLDR, a fellow police officer working at the same department my father works at cancelled a ticket received by my aunt. My aunt responds to this by thanking neither my dad or the other officer and then referring to that officer as a nigger and Aunt Jemima in front of my dad. This is probably going to be ignored, but whatever. This is the story of why I stopped celebrating any holidays. I used to date this girl and her family wasn't so much nuts as a pinnacle of society's faked up state of self-centered entitlement. Get what you can, any means necessary, give nothing back, that sort of thing. The only way they'd communicate with each other is texting each other, in the same house, often next room, and starting shouting matches, if there was no response. I haven't heard one normal conversation in my entire time there. It was quite surreal, as even my dysfunctional family would think it'd be more efficient to just walk up to the person instead of putting so much energy in shouting. But, So, let's say it would be Christmas Eve, but applicable to any bullshit gift moment. The family would pull stubs to see who needed to give who presents and what at how much. This would already strike me odd, as it ruins the whole gift idea, but whatever, I roll with it. Now here comes the fun part. Each and every time someone would get something, the other people would obligatorily require similar things of equal or greater value. And every single time, hell would break loose if they didn't. I'm not talking about matching gift prizes here. I'm talking more. If someone needed to get surgery that cost $1,000, someone would tally that and go, oh yeah, well, she gets to spend $1,000. Where's my $1,000? And start full grown hissy fits that would last 4 days for stuff they didn't need at all. The straw was with some dumb bullcrap. My date and her sister both required jackets, building up on yet some other inane possession power struggle. So, they both receive coats. Even if they have 17 of them, that's fine. They both get the one they liked and wanted, no questions asked. But then one realizes that one coat costed $50 more / less than the other, and all hell breaks loose again. They both got what they wanted, but felt they still deserved the equal compensation, because fuck you, money. I just couldn't do it anymore. Trying to get me on their side, they explained said logic to me, but I'd merely say, you both got the coat you wanted, there's no issue, you're creating one. Don't say that to your date if you enjoy not having pointless fights. Of course, nothing got resolved that day, and then one got a chair as compensation, which meant the other needed a chair or a new desk, or whatever the fuck, and I just tuned out. I stopped going to any giftable event and haven't since. If I get a gift, that's cool, just as long as you know you're not getting something because of a set date / action. You'll get one because I like you, or you'll get nothing. I really don't understand people sometimes. My roommate and I had an ungrateful prick situation last year. We'll call him V. My former friend V wasn't paying his bills and, from my understanding, hadn't been paying his bills for quite some time. He mostly scammed money off of others that he proclaimed friends, who of course were the most important thing in his life, probably because he was a leech. So my current roommate, let's call him P, moves in for the summer with V and ends up paying for most of his bills, while V parties away the summer. During some of these parties, a lot of P's stuff gets broken, and V offers to repair them, but never does. At the end of the summer, P and I start living together, and V lives with some other mutual friends. Flash forward to the winter time. V lied to his roommates, basically stole their rent money, and hid the warnings and eviction notices from his roommates, so they had no idea. The poor bastards found out right before they were almost kicked out, and end up kicking V out after they fronted the money. V winds up moving into P's and my place without either of our consent. P and I are decent human beings, and personally I thought P told V he could stay. I never knew the exact circumstances for a few months, but V made sure to paint his roommates as the villains. So V stays at our place for the spring and summer, and doesn't pay any of the rent or utilities until well into the summer. V then ends up breaking my sheet too. Of course, doesn't offer to fix any of it, and in a few cases lies about it. During this time he invites people we don't know over, and I have my sheets stolen. He also invites tons of people to our apartment's pool, which helps lead to a security crackdown, ruining the pool for our complex. Eventually V finds his own place at the end of the summer and now doesn't even attempt to communicate with us. V is the reason I stopped trusting people and started being more cautious about my company. TLDR, found out someone I've known since high school has no problem taking advantage of his friends and then stops talking to them once he's milked them for all they're worth. Edit, I like grammar. Growing up my parents did not make a lot of money. We weren't poor, but we were rarely able to afford anything extra, just what we needed. I was in high school when my dad started making better money in college, when he crossed the line between lower and upper middle class. All this is to explain that for a long time they didn't have much to call their own, so they took care of what things they had, cause buying more if it broke was out of the question. So here's the story. My parents moved and were trying to sell their old house. My brother's family had just moved back from out of state and were looking for a home. They made a deal with my parents to rent it from them until the sale on their former house was finalized. After they moved in, they told my parents they wanted to buy it, which everybody thought was awesome cause we all loved that house. They wanted to change a few things, paint walls and ceilings, stain the wood floors, remodel one bathroom, and change the flooring in the kitchen. My parents told them they could do whatever they want cause they were buying it. Do you see where this is going? Of course you do. My sister-in-law is a DIYer. She successfully flipped 3 properties in the 2 years they lived out of state and did almost all the work by herself. She wanted to do the floors and ceilings before moving into the house. My parents knew they were financially strapped due to the move and offered to pay for the renovations, then just add the cost to the sale price when they wrote the contract. My brother and his wife agreed. So, my sil got to work. She sanded the floors down and put the stain on with an old mop, which left permanent streaks all over. Apparently this is important because cypress floors can only be sanded 3 times. Don't ask me why. She painted the white ceiling tiles with a thick white wall paint, which caused them to start falling down randomly. The kitchen floor she installed was uneven, causing quite a few people to trip over corners of tile, and then she gutted 2 of the bathrooms and put in all new water pipes that, come to find out, were too small and not the right material. They lived there for 6 months. They never once, even subtly, gave anyone a reason to think they had changed their minds. But they had. They had been continuously looking at and visiting other houses for sale and found one they wanted to buy. The way they broke the news was the worst part. My brother didn't even have the balls to call. He sent my dad an email which included 1 picture. No words. No explanation. A single picture of the signed contract for the house they were buying. This was 5 years ago. My parents haven't seen a penny for the crappy half-assed renovations. My brother has no intention of ever paying them back. He is still angry at my parents for their negative reaction to his email and because they didn't appreciate all my sil's hard work. He's mad that they weren't respectful of his wife's feelings when they got upset about the faked up floors. And most faking outrageous of all, he thinks my sil was tricked into fixing things the wrong way, so my mom would have a reason to be mad at her cause my mom is jealous. What the fuck? Now my parents are stuck fixing what she faked up and eating the cost of her faking it up. But there is a silver lining. Once they realized how much they really cared about this house they were trying to sell, they moved back into it and we all rejoiced. I love this house. TLDR, my brother and his wife faked up my parents' house, then got mad at my parents. Selfish, deceitful, and ungrateful turds. This will be buried, but here goes. In early 2008 my mom gets a call from DCFS to see if she can take in my cousin who was 14 or so around that time. If not, he would have had to live in a foster home. My aunt, who was my uncle's 3rd wife, had an unlivable house and my uncle was going through cancer treatment and living with his girlfriend at the time. This is a cousin on my dad's side and my mom and dad are divorced, mind you, so they went through a lot of channels before calling my mom. My mom agrees and he comes and stays in my brother's old room. I hadn't seen my cousin in a very long time and he was always a big kid and he was big for his age. Could have been a football player if he actually gave a fuck. He says he has a girlfriend from California and he calls her on our phone. He comes to our house with only the clothes on his back pretty much. He gets a clean house, clean clothes, and 3 hot meals a day. My mom breaks her back and buys him new clothes and gets him set up at my old high school. First day of high school she tries to wake him up and gets up 2 hours after school begins. She drives him there. Second day, he gets on the bus in time. My mom gets a call later that day to pick him up because he is suspended for bringing a Swiss Army knife to school, something he found in my brother's room. My mom is livid, and I'm too, after she did all this stuff for him and he just pisses all over it. She tells him he can't use the phone anymore and I tell him he can't use my computer. After 2 days my mom lets up and buys him a CD but keeps her other punishments intact. I can't remember all of them. He asks if he can just call his girlfriend to tell her what's up and she agrees. I'm getting off work when this next little thing goes down. I live less than 2 minutes from my work, so this happened fast. I get back home and there is silence, no TV or anything. I let out a hello and my mom says they are in the family room. She has a smirk saying that they are fighting. I didn't think too much of it and go upstairs. change my clothes, and call my buddy to hang out. I next hear my cousin yelling at my mom something along the lines of well fine. What I walked in on was an argument that started when he called his girlfriend from California. He told her the situation, and she told him that that wasn't fair and that he should be running the show. She told him to go tell my mom that he felt he shouldn't have been punished. So he did, and my mom got extremely offended. She yells that she's calling my dad first thing in the morning and that she wants him out of the house. Then she changed her mind immediately and said she wanted him out tonight. My mom calls my dad, who was living at my grandma's temporarily, and tells him what happened. My dad gets out of bed to drive to my mom's and pick up my cousin. In the meantime, I forgot my friend was coming over. So he comes into my house while this is going down. My cousin is getting his things ready upstairs. My mom says to keep an eye on him, and my friend was doing his best to keep my mom calm. She was very flustered. My dad shows up about 45 minutes later, and he is pissed. My dad says something along the lines of, "You are an ungrateful, spoiled little brat, and just threw away something good. I'm calling DCFS tomorrow and you're going into foster care." My cousin called my brother and I wimps for not standing up for ourselves growing up with my parents or something. My dad said that our family respected each other and that with respect no one is a wimp. He got sent to a foster home and then eventually back to his mom's house after he got his sheet together. I have another story about my mom and my uncle, my cousin's father, from that year as well. Nothing my uncle did, but rather his girlfriend. TL. Doctor, my mom took in my cousin instead of him going to a foster home. He disrespected her, so she kicked him out. My sister sued my dad for child support and won. Over the past 2 years my dad paid for her 2-year nursing degree along with textbooks and a laptop. On top of this, the over $800 payments per month gave her over $20,000 in spending money. It's a complicated situation to explain. One summer she actually refused a student nursing job, working in an old age home I think, that paid somewhere around $22 an hour and instead took a job working at some summer camp that paid minimum wage. This of course in addition to being completely unrelated to the nursing field. Anyway, fast forward to 2 years later and today she basically failed the nursing degree and the laptop is completely broken. She has been begging my dad for a new laptop and money for the past couple months. Apparently she is going to try something else. My dad will probably be paying for her apartment, but he said he won't be paying for her new degree. Edit. For those who don't believe this, Canadian law states that a judge may order continued child support payments for 18-plus-year-old children if said child is attending college/university. That is what happened here. We also got a particularly bad judge and my dad did not bring a lawyer in, which should tell you something about his character. My story is sort of similar, without the same extreme reaction. I had just finished college about 8 years ago and was an extremely broke guy. I have 11 nieces and nephews. We have a big family, of which I'm second to youngest. I'm also one of the only ones to make it through college. Most of us are lower middle class. All my nephews and nieces are almost exactly a year apart in age. 4 different families. I figured I could make it my contribution to their education by making sure they had the technology they needed for school. My oldest niece had gotten accepted into a good college. My wife and I spent the summer working extra odd jobs and saved up for a brand new $1,200 laptop, plus extra money for accessories. I figured we could do it every summer, and if one of the kids decided not to go to school, we'd just have extra savings that year. I also purchased extra software, installed everything she could need for a couple years of school, got a nice backpack, an iPod, a big external drive, and made the laptop as close to indestructible as I could. Antivirus, automatic backup, automatic updates and malware scans, etc. We even got her an iTunes card, printer and thumb drive to make her life easier. I got everything together and drove 5 hours to surprise her and her mom on the day they were moving into her dorm room. She was very appreciative and thanked me. Her mom started crying. I knew they hadn't been able to afford anything like that. I drove away feeling good. Then, less than 3 weeks later, she decided she was homesick, dropped out of college and moved home. She never went back to college. I've bought a couple more laptops since then, but I wait until they have been in school at least 2 semesters. So, it was a fine day when I, aged 11, was attending my little brother's birthday. His name was Mike. The username and the time I've had this account should be no surprise. Anyhow, Mike was a normal, 4-year-old. And by normal I mean, there was something odd about him. Anyhow, his birthday came, and I only had about 3 fine options: chocolate, toys, and clothes. Not an actual option, unless I'm considered old to him. So, I decided to get Mike some Nutella. My parents bought us some cheaper no-name brand that tasted like a more horrible crunchier version of Nutella. So, I bought him Nutella with my own money, and when the time came, I gave it to him. He was grateful, but said that he couldn't take it because he was allergic to nuts. I understood and gave him my Gamma Boy. We both share it anyways, so I can't really call it gave. I should have known he wasn't really allergic because A, I would have known from my parents, and B, he ate 50% of that fake Nutella and the only reason it was crunchy was because of those nuts. The next morning, my dad came to me and asked, "Did you give Mike any candy for his birthday?" I told him that I still had the jar of Nutella and I hadn't opened it because I went to sleep right after the party. My dad opened the jar and guess what we found? Most of the Nutella was eaten. The only part that wasn't eaten was the part that was stuck with the transparent container to make it look like it wasn't a shade. My dad then explained to me how this morning, how Mike ate all the candy he got as presents, and now his sugar intake is too high. I stormed into his room and yelled, "You lied to me," as loud as I could. He was in the dead center of his bed, and he looked like he was waiting for me. That look in on his face, oh lord, that look. His smile was creepy, his eyes were moving everywhere, and he was shivering. He looked like something that belonged in r/Noelep. After that, one thing led to another while my dad was outside the room, and we both ended up in the hospital. TLDR, my brother got me and himself landed into the hospital. I have to admit, when I was about 16 I was a really spoiled little brat. For Christmas my dad had bought me a Guxy handbag. At this point in time though, I hated anything designer, because I saw it all as being chavvy and girly and conformist. Besides, I wasn't a bag kind of girl anyway. I wasn't very rude about it when I opened it, but I wasn't exactly oh my god best present ever. Later on I told my mum quietly that it wasn't really my thing, and if she wanted to use it instead, she could, because she liked handbags and had quite a few. Fast forward several years. I had moved out and to London to live with my boyfriend. I still live here, and we were going to visit my mum for Christmas. I still wanted to see if there was any old stuff that I wanted from home, so I was poking around in my old room. I found the bag, still in the box, unused and in perfect condition. As I'd grown up, I had grown to realize the value of presents such as these, and I remembered when I'd shunned the bag, and I felt absolutely terrible. My dad seems quite bossy and domineering sometimes, but actually he's quite a sensitive guy, and I was so ungrateful. I talked to dad and said I'd found the bag in my room, and if it was okay if I could have it, that I was sorry I hadn't appreciated it when he'd first bought it, and that I wasn't mature enough to understand its value. He got a bit misty-eyed and said I could have it and that he was proud of me. I now use it all the time, and it's my favorite accessory. I have also never been ungrateful for any gift or act of kindness since. I wish I can say that this happened to me or anyone around me, but growing up poor in a poor neighborhood in a poor town makes you aware of finance crisis, though I myself have a spending problem, which is bad and needs to be fixed. Everything that was bought for us was earned. There was one time I didn't think I'd get what I wanted for Christmas, the new Xbox 360 at the time, and when I actually did get it, I was so grateful to me mom that, finding out that she spent her job money on getting it, meaning we were broke again, I went out, got myself a job as a paper boy, and went out making money myself. I gave me mom $500 just for being her. Edit. Just remembered that there was a Razholicant, an old friend of mine, that I blocked from me mind. I was great friends with him. We hung out all the time, even though it was only at school, since I lived too far away from him to actually go over. One day, I get invited to a birthday party he was holding at this arcade and I buy him a present. It was an action figure, and head over. He had a bunch of other friends. That didn't bother me. What did fucking bother me was the fact that he was giddy when he gets all these other toys and gizmos, but when he gets to mine, remember, I'm poor and this person knows it, he loses much of his excitement and just says thanks to me. Later on, he's hanging out with a lot of them, and no matter what I do, I'm unable to join in. I try to talk to him myself, or at least get one of them to play a game with me, but they were more comfortable with hanging around and not doing anything but talking, even excluding me. I spent my time playing the games by myself then, delisting him from my mind, telling myself he was no longer a friend. It was then and there. Now I know that I developed my shyness, social anxiety, and hatred for parties. I've never been to or had a party since. You can say I've become a loner since paranoia gripped me and I crossed every one of my friends, making them acquaintances, except the asshole. I hung out with them and helped them out, but refused being called their friend. That way if they did something like assholic, I wouldn't be hurt as much. Oh my god. This was slightly similar to what I did 2 Christmases ago. I was heading off to uni in the fall and my parents had made it clear I was getting a laptop as a combo birthday/Christmas gift. I was so stoked and thankful, and we were trying to figure out what kind to get me. Well, everyone I know has a MacBook, and I like some of the cool things you can do with Macs, like GarageBand etc. My parents, however, were skeptical about Macs as they had heard horror stories about repair costs etc. Usually I'm very rational, but a few days before Christmas my parents bring up the Dell's a solid computers argument. I don't know what the fuck was up with my head, but I flipped out and said I wanted a MacBook, but pretty much threw a fit about it. Oh god, so embarrassing. Christmas morning comes, open all presents. Dad pipes up and says now, there is one more present. It's not here yet. I had ordered you a Dell Inspiron, but since you wanted the Mac so badly, I cancelled the order. I don't want to disappoint you, honey. I want you to have what you want. So in a couple months we should have enough money saved from my overtime work to go get you a MacBook. I have never sobbed so hard. I felt like a horrible daughter, so ungrateful. I ended up getting a Dell and have never once had a problem with it at all, even while all my friends' Macs have been faking up. People have said my dad was just trying to guilt trip me. He wasn't. He's not like that, and I could see it all over his face that he truly wanted me to have a MacBook because it would make me happy. Go all the feels. Edit. TLDR, I acted like a spoiled beach to my parents getting a laptop and dad's words hit me right in the feels. I was on a flight from Schiphol to Rome. To my right was an American couple, 50-ish. To my left was an old German couple, 70-ish. The cabin crew was serving breakfast at that time, but I've been in transit for the past 12 hours. I was more tired than hungry. The trolley passes and we get our food and just have tea and some cookies. I didn't even touch the fresh fruits which were served. I didn't want it to go to waste, so I offered them to the couple to my right. I wasn't sure how they would respond to my offer. I didn't expect them to shower me with thanks and all that. But instead of saying, no thanks, they instead looked at me with disgust, with that high school kind of feel. You don't talk to me 'cause you're not in the cool group kind of look. They call a flight attendant and ask if they can be transferred elsewhere. I'm sitting there dumbfounded. I felt like I did something horrible to them. All I did was offer them my mother faking fruit cup. I just hung my head in embarrassment and continued to sip my tea. But then to my surprise, the old German couple to my left looked at me and smiled. The old lady suddenly patted me in the back and said it's okay. Some people just don't know a simple gesture of kindness when facing it. We continued chatting for the rest of the flight. The older couple reminded me of my grandparents who were really awesome, warm and kind people. Fuck those other guys. I hope they had a rotten holiday. TLDR, offered my fruit cups to a couple. They give me looks and ask to be transferred to different seat on the plane. Older couple saves my day by being kind and warm-hearted human beings. A few years ago, when I was getting my master's in drama, I was fortunate enough to score an all expenses paid 1-week trip to Dubrovnik, Croatia with the school. Money was tight between my wife and I, so we couldn't afford the cost of a plane ticket for her to join me. A little backstory here. When we were younger and money was tight, I was a little stingy with the spontaneous romantic gift giving, because I was broke. In response to this, she once explicitly told me that she would be just as happy if I gave her a blade of grass, her words, as an expensive bouquet of flowers, because the important thing was the thought behind the gift. While on the Croatia trip, I tried to gather several cheap but thoughtful souvenirs. I bought her some ink sketches of the city from a street vendor on one day for a few US. I got a CD postcard/virtual tour of the old city and a welcome pack from the festival we were attending that I set aside for her. I called home halfway through the week just to surprise her and tell her I missed her. After our performance on our last night, the festival gave us an enormous bouquet of local flowers. I took a few and pressed them in the pages of my script to bring home for her. I got home and opened up my bag of trinkets for my wife, took out the pressed flowers, and gave them to her. She put on a smile, said, "Oh, how sweet." I offered to put in the CD and show her where we went and what we did, but she seemed unenthusiastic. I didn't press the issue, figuring that I was misinterpreting something. A couple days later, she says out of the blue, "I'm going to throw these flowers away because they don't mean anything to me." I was a little confused by that statement, a little hurt, but I said okay. She didn't get around to throwing them out that day, but then said again a couple days later, "I'm going to throw these flowers away." "Okay," I said, "because they don't mean anything to me." That's the second time you've said that exact sentence this week. Obviously I'm not getting what you're actually trying to tell me. Basically, she felt like the flowers were an insult because they were dead and not purchased fresh. I guess I should have gone to the corner store that specializes in indigenous Croatian flowers. And since that was all I got her, it was obvious I didn't care. I tried pointing out that the flowers weren't simply dead, that I had pressed them in the pages of a book to preserve them for her. Didn't matter. This turned into a rather heated argument. I pointed out that I had tried to share my trip with her using the CD. She thought that, since I got the CD for free, it didn't count. I reminded her about the relatively expensive transatlantic phone call to surprise her. She didn't think it was that big of a deal. I pointed out the ink sketches. She felt that was a present for us, and not her, since they were going in our apartment. I then asked her if she remembered about the blade of grass. That stopped her. She thought for a minute and said, "Oh, wow. I'm really being an ungrateful bitch, aren't I?" 2 years later we were divorced, but not just because of this. Think they don't consider me family, since I was adopted at birth, and my brother was a real child. Back when I was still trying desperately to win everyone's acceptance, one year I went all out for Christmas and spent $400 buying my brother's kids presents. Note that my brother makes well into 6 figures, about double what I make, and my sis-in-law makes good money too. Also note they spent $10 at garage sales for my Christmas presents, and I'm not exaggerating. My nephews seemed to really enjoy opening the presents, but not once did they look at me to say they liked the gifts, or say thank you. So when all was said and done, my mother said, "Aren't you boys going to thank your Aunt Snark Snout for the presents?" The oldest nephew looked genuinely confused and said, "We don't have an aunt. We only have 2 uncles." Later in the day I overheard my sis-in-law loudly going off to my parents and my brother about how stupid all of the gifts were and what a waste of money they were. The next year my brother sent a message to me through my mother, since I'm not worth a phone call or an email, that I was to buy the boys a new PlayStation for Christmas. I did, went in one half with my other brother, and bought other presents for their entire family as well. In return, I got a half-used container of body lotion. I stopped getting Christmas presents around the time I was 6 years old. My parents stopped giving me birthday presents when I was about 10. My mom looked at me and told me, "Casreal02, from now on you're old enough, so I want you to start giving me presents on your birthday. I spent 10 hours on a hospital bed in labor with you. I weigh 100 pounds and you weighed in at 9. The morning sickness you gave me was so bad I lost 20 pounds after giving birth to you, and I don't have 20 pounds to lose. I thought about it, agreed that it seemed reasonable, and started buying my parents presents every year on my birthday. My sister on the other hand, got 2 birthday presents every year until she was 8 or so. One on mine and one on hers. She got Christmas presents, I didn't. That said, my allowance was tied to chores, so I always had access to money as long as I was willing to work a little extra for it. I'm glad they raised me the way they did though, cause at 30, I own a successful restaurant that provides for my entire family and then some. Sure, I work about 100 hours a week, but I do something I love doing, and I can take care of everyone around me. All of my employees have full health insurance plus dental, and make well above industry averages for restaurant employees, and I can afford to fund my parents' retirement as well as take care of their healthcare expenses. My sister on the other hand, at 28 has never held down a proper job and still lives in my parents' spare bedroom. I feel bad for her when I see her because my parents coddling her robbed her of the opportunities I had. But then again, we are not the same kind of people. If I offered to trade lives with her right now, she would probably tell me I was crazy. And conversely, I'd probably kill myself before I lived in my parents' spare bedroom at 30 years old. So to each his own, I guess. First, as a Pinoy, I would like to request her exact words in Tagalog as I'm genuinely curious and frustrated that I can't seem to think of a proper English to Tagalog translation about it. This didn't happen to me, but a friend of mine. She demolished 2 mailboxes a few days ago. She's new to driving and got distracted when her books fell down while driving. Like a responsible newbie driver, she left all her info on her 2 notes and left one for each house. She included her phone number, address, email, and commented that she would pay for all the damages. I think the insurance would cover it. One of the mailboxes was a cheap, everyday mailbox you see everywhere. The owner was kind when he called and said they get a new mailbox out of it anyway. The other mailbox was made of cinder blocks which was covered with some decorative pine tree bark. Probably the most expensive goddamn mailbox in the neighborhood, and she manages to hit it. The owner called and immediately started with a yelling, angry voice, like a drunkard after his hometown rugby football team just lost. My friend complied with everything, trying to ignore his rudeness, and maintained a cool tone all through the call. He eventually got bored when he realized he wasn't getting a rise out of my friend and hung up. We haven't heard from him since, and we don't know what the hell is going on with what he wants us to do. I drive by his house every day to work, and the top half of his mailbox is sitting right where we left it. We moved it out of his driveway, where it landed, so they could park easily. It kind of just looks like a lawn ornament now. We didn't have much money growing up, and had virtually no consumer goods. For instance, no TV, no CDs, no video, no computer etc. My dad, who was divorced from my mum, did have all this stuff, and often bought us expensive presents in an attempt to buy affection, as he was a pretty useless and feckless father. One year my brother and I became obsessed with getting a Nintendo for Christmas, and he always said we'll see. We never asked our mum as we knew she couldn't afford it. In the morning he gave us an electric plug all wrapped up and told us it was part of our main present that we could unwrap when we got to his house. We were nearly delirious with excitement by the time we arrived, convinced that finally we could join in, when our friends started talking about games like Super Mario etc. We got to his house, unwrapped our present, and it was a very simple and plain radio cassette player. I have never been so gutted in my life. He strung us along and along and along, and we were devastated. For a long time I used to feel embarrassed at how badly my brother and I then behaved. We really showed ourselves up in front of our extended family, but now as a parent I just think that what he did was unforgivable. We had spent most of our lives getting second-hand books and clothes as presents. We weren't remotely materialistic, but by letting us believe he had bought us a Nintendo, even the teaser was such that it looked like he had, we were just not emotionally mature enough to deal with that level of disappointment. So, we behaved badly and properly stropped out over what was quite a nice present, but only after being horribly led on by our dad, who made us think he bought us a Nintendo. I was recently at a restaurant on a busy Thursday night and there was a long wait. There were already people waiting when we got there, but they didn't seem to have a host in charge of seating people. There were 3 teenage girl servers working maybe 20 plus tables with a slow turnover. They were running all over the place and you could tell they were really breaking their backs trying to do their best. Everyone who got there before us were waiting to put a name down with a server until someone noticed a sign-up sheet that was obscured on a table by the side. People started getting pushy, rushing to the sheet as though someone else was going to steal their place in line. We put our name down, and just as I was about to take a seat in the waiting area, I heard a scuffle behind us. A woman who had just arrived sounded huffy and started complaining how ridiculous the service was, etc. So trying to be nice and helpful, and seeing these girls work so hard, I turned to the woman and kindly told her the sign-up sheet was on the table. She looked offended and declared in a very condescending tone, "I made reservations." Dang. I just kind of gave her a no sorry smile and sat down. When we were finally seated and eating, in order to get the attention of any of the servers, to ask for something I had to turn around in my chair and this woman was actually seated directly behind me and kept giving me the death stare, like I had tried to make her feel less important. Rude people suck. Edited, for clarity. Right, every Christmas we spend with our family friends. My mum and the mother of this family, they have 2 boys. One is a year younger than me, the other is the same age as my sister who is 5 years younger than me. This was when I was about 10. We go over to their house and we see about 20 plus presents each for them. 4 for my brother, 3 for my sister, and 1 for me. I had asked for a DS Lite. My parents give us £60 each for Christmas. So I had to save up £50 of my pocket money to get this DS, and would have to play my GBA games on it, and wait until I could afford DS games with my pocket money, or wait until my birthday. Now I'm fine with this, as this is how it's been since I was young. The older of the 2 kids received an Xbox 360. He's furious because it's an Elite, the better model, compared to a white Xbox. He gets 2 controllers and £539.99 games and he's furious. Why didn't you get me more? He demands of his parents. He also gets a mobile phone at 9, and a pretty nice one at that. He sulks the entire day, calls his poor parents horrible who take this abuse and promise to trade in his Xbox the next day. "You better or I'll never speak to you again. I hate you," is his approximate reply. The younger kid receives a lot less than the older kid, and my mum always tells me how the older one is preferred because he does better in school. Faking dick. We were pretty astonished to say the least. We haven't spent the last 4 Christmases with them because they've gone to Canada every year instead to see family, which is fine by me. I don't really want to see him again. My ex-girlfriend's mom was getting ready to move to Atlanta to begin a fresh start with her life. She had been victim of divorce, being wrapped and then losing her job all within a couple-year period. She decided that she would just give away all of her current possessions and literally get everything new when she got to Atlanta. My ex-girlfriend got almost everything her mom was giving away, including her brand new flat screen TV, 27 inches iMac, a new red Chevy Cruze, already paid off, to replace her old and worn out Explorer, then had 160k miles on it, vacuum with that pet hairbrush attached, clothes, DVD player and DVDs, dishes, glasses, pots, and pans. I could list more, but basically it was nearly everything you could want for your home. And all pretty much brand new. Her brother got their mom's 2 couches and that's it. My ex-girlfriend threw a crying fit, whining to her mom saying things like, "Mom, you knew I wanted those couches. I can't believe what a bitch you are." She even had the audacity to tell her mom, "I hate you and can't wait for you to move away. You obviously don't know your daughter at all, so you might as well just leave." All because the couches went to her brother. Her mom called me in tears, telling me all the things her daughter was saying to her, all because she didn't give her everything. Her mom moved away and they still haven't talked. It's been over a month. I once knew a girl really well back in high school. We'll call her Jenny. She was incredibly smart, funny, and sweet, but she lived with these absolutely terrible parents. The mom was a high-functioning alcoholic who would constantly belittle her when she was drunk, which was all the time. The dad probably abused a variety of substances, I couldn't really tell, but he was definitely tweaked out quite a few times I saw him, and played as little a role as possible in his child's life. And yet, Jenny still tried to be a good daughter. She did as she was told, quietly and efficiently, all while absorbing in the slow of verbal abuse that was thrown into her room by her beach mother. She never spoke up against them, and always tried to please them. Her mother didn't even try to filter herself while guests around, and it was honestly really uncomfortable at times. One day in sophomore year, Jenny tried to make her mom happy by bringing back this beautiful clay jar that she had been working on in art class. It was very intricately detailed, completely symmetrical, and had a tight sealing lid too, which she had even managed to attach a rubber lining to, so it would be more airtight. I was going home with her that day so that we could finish some bio project we had to work on. When we got into her living room, where her mother was, as she always has, lounging on the musty old couch, feet on table, liquor in hand, scowl on face, Jenny walked up hesitantly, but eagerly towards her mother, cookie jar in hand. I stayed a good ways back. "Hey, mom," she said quietly. "What?" This curt, one-word response from her was nothing special. Still, the acidity in it could always be heard. I made this for you." She sets the jar on the coffee table in between her and her mother. "I hope you like it." I spent 2 weeks crash. Her mother had rearranged her feet on the table, and in doing so, she had accidentally on purpose brushed the jar onto the tile floor below. Jenny stood, stunned. "Oops." Jenny's eyes were beginning to well up with tears quickly, and she clasped her hands to her mouth, and then quickly walked past me, out the front door. The mom stared at me, and I glared back at her with all the anger those 15-year-old eyes could muster. Then, I turned to help Jenny. I opened the door, got on the floor, everybody walk the dinosaur. I was pretty young at the time, so I may have misinterpreted the situation, but nonetheless, my brothers and I were young, around 5 and 6, and really excited to be spending the day with our dad. Since our parents were divorced, we didn't get to see him as often as we really wanted to. Whenever we did see him, he always took us out for hamburgers, or to a water park, anything to make our limited time with him memorable. We're leaving the water park with bellies full of soda and ice cream encrusted on our lips, when we notice a woman, about in her 50s, who parked next to us is really flustered. Her car battery had died, and when she saw us coming, she asked our dad if he could help. My dad isn't a mechanic, but he knows a lot about maintaining and repairing vehicles, so he agrees to get his jumper cables. It's a quick process and the woman's car is up and running very soon. She beams as the car comes to life again. She comes around to close the hood and then scowls at my dad and says, "I shit you not, I hope you weren't expecting any sexual favors for this." Doesn't say thank you, smile or anything. My dad took his jumper cables, put us in the back seat, and then drove off. Unfortunately for her, we noticed as we left one of her front tires was blown too. I wanted to share 2 stories, one in a reversed role. The first story takes place when I was a poor college student at Christmas. My brother at the time was really getting into music, especially the older stuff, and started playing the bass. I went to Sam Goody and got him a Jimi Hendrix DVD, and I think I also got him a CD or poster to go along with it. Altogether it was about $20-25 spent, and I thought I was being pretty creative with everything. My mom even commented that it was thoughtful. I was also trying to make sure I got presents for my parents as well. We open our gifts on Christmas and at first my brother seemed okay about the present. I opened his present, which was The Sims 2, which had just come out. He then throws a fit because he had spent $50 of my parents' money on me and he had gotten such a crappy cheap gift. I was pretty bummed because I had really tried so hard on a meager budget. The other story, and the more influential one, takes place after I had gotten my first car over the summer. It was Christmas again, and I had made a list of reasonable items, with a few luxury things thrown in there, about 10 things in total. We open our gifts Christmas morning. Almost all of the gifts I received were something for my car: tire gauges, dashboard compass, Things you would get going down the Walmart auto aisle. I was never one for practical gifts and usually bought whatever I needed for my car. Upon looking at all my gifts I realized I hadn't received one thing on my list. I, as a foolish teenager, said this point out loud. Boy, my dad was pissed. I felt like this after he was done yelling at me. I wanted to tell the second story because I think my dad and I both learned something that day. I learned to be grateful for any gifts, especially those that had thought put in behind them. I think my dad learned to acknowledge my personality and not just my circumstances when selecting gifts. When gifts are exchanged now I think we all know how to select things for each other. TLDR, brother got pissed because I didn't spend the same amount of money on his gift when I was a poor college student. I was an ungrateful 16-year-old when my parents bought me things for my car. My brother and everything he does. He's 28, unemployed, begging my dad for money so he can stay in his apartment and not move back in with my mother. He's a mama's boy, for sure, would only go back to her if he lost his apt. Refuses to get a job because anything that's on the table right now isn't his dream job. Refuses to complete his master's thesis review board told him they wouldn't pass the paper he originally proposed. He insisted on turning it in anyways. Sold his car, which my father bought him, without discussing it with my dad. Blew through a $35,000 inheritance from my grandmother. I still have half of the same amount left to me, and I'm the irresponsible child. HMM. Borrowed tens of thousands from my dad for living expenses, while supposedly finishing his degree. Refuses to pay it back. Agrees to go in with my stepbrothers and I on group Christmas/Father's Day gifts. Never pays his portion. Never calls dad or stepmom unless he wants money or it's someone's birthday/Father's Day/Mother's Day/etc. Literally does not talk to anyone, even when he's physically in front of them. One word answers. No attempt to carry on a conversation with family at holidays. So my dad calls him a while back and my brother mentions that he just got back from some kind of video game/tech conference in LA. I forget what the hell the big one is called, E3 or something, I dunno. My dad is furious that he went to LA for almost 2 weeks when he doesn't even have money to pay his rent and asks why he did this. Brother replies that he went to network with people in the industry so that when he finishes his degree he knows people to contact. Except he's not going to leave the East Coast, where we live now, or ask any of these people for help with getting a job, so he just wanted to meet people for fun really. He sees nothing wrong with this. At the time that this happened, I was working 70 hours a week for a very demanding job, and I barely made enough to support myself, let alone go on a motherfucking vacation. On top of that, he had been constantly hounding my dad for money while claiming poverty, but obviously he had money if he could afford the trip. I don't even want to call my dad and ask him to help me pay for college, let alone for money, just to live however I feel like it. Oh, and after this my dad wrote him out of his and stepmom's will. My brother got so scared he had my mother call my stepmom and harass her about it. We haven't heard from my brother in months, now that he knows he's not getting any money. Oh wait, even better, our youngest stepbrother has leukemia, and stupid brother has not called or visited him once in the almost 2 years since he's been diagnosed and undergoing very intensive chemo and radiation treatments. Not faking once. That is your goddamn brother. I don't care what our mother says. She tells him he's just out stepbrother, so it doesn't matter, cunt. I want to smack the shit out of this kid. Some years back I worked for a city-owned park/lake. It has a concession stand, boat rentals, shelters and the like. In fact I was a shift manager, which means that given the lazier state of the actual full-time manager, I practically ran the joint when I was there. It was an awful lot of responsibility to place on just a college student and for sheet pay, but I digress. Summers were hell and the days were long and extremely busy. All booked shelters, a wedding on the deck overlooking the lake and a full boat trailer lot were commonplace. This was such a day as I struggled to keep up sending staff to check shelters, run concessions, manage the boat rentals and secure the park via truck/boat patrols. We had to clean, pull trash and secure each shelter before closing time, sundown, so shelter rentals typically ended an hour before that. Well, there was a family who was dragging us packing up and leaving one of our smaller shelters, so I had to go personally ask them to leave. The main gent, a partially balding portly Indian man, gave me a mouthful and trashed the place before he left. It was 10 PM before my crew and I finished cleaning the park and clocked out to go home. Now, on the way up to the parking lot, mind you, this is in an opposite part of the park than the shelter we had problems with, I found a small black bag resting on one of the park's many picnic tables. Upon investigating it, I discovered it was one of those fancy high-definition video cameras, which were extremely expensive back then. Also inside the bag were some papers which documented the owner's name and address. With that I figured I could full identify the person, so I brought the bag with me. The next day I looked up the name and address and found a phone number. I left 3 messages over the course of the next few days. On the 3rd day I finally received a call back from a frantic sounding man over his lost camera. He sounded extremely grateful and gave me his current address. The one in the bag was outdated, so I could drop it off. Now, this guy must have been loaded. His house was freaking huge. Like, his mailbox looked more expensive than my entire neighborhood, kind of rich. I parked my car and ran up and knocked on the door with the camera bag in tow. Who opens the door? Who else but partially balding portly Indian fellow. As soon as he sees me, I can see the gears turning in his head as he places who I am. Without much else, he insisted I come inside. He snakes me through the labyrinth that is this man's first floor until we finally arrive in what I assume is one of his many offices. He pops a squat in his huge executive looking chair and asks me to have a seat. He then inquires as to how I came upon his camera. I happily tell him the whole tale, where I found the item and how I found him. I was pretty proud of my internet sleuthing abilities to correctly locate the rightful owner. Once finished he stares at me for a bit before asking me what I'd like for compensation. I said about 350. It was then he realized the humble park employee was about 500 feet tall and from the Paleolithic era. No? Okay. He thanked me and insisted I take a bottle of wine as a reward. That went better than expected, right? A week later I got called into work by a rather angry sounding boss. Turns out Mr. Partially balding portly Indian fellow came in, accused me of stealing the camera since I took it off the property from his shelter when I rudely kicked them out and demanded that his shelter rental fee be refunded. The one thing I learned working for the city is that if you're part-time, you're faked. No one has your back and everything is always your fault. The man was refunded and I was scolded and fired. Remember when I said how wealthy the man must be? The shelter rental was $60. He got a city worker who went out of his way to return precious family belongings. His words, not mine, fired over his greed of $60. The bottle of wine was sheet 2. TLDR, for the love of God, don't try to return lost items. 2 years ago, my cousin and her 2 kids moved into my parents' house right as I was moving out. The cousin didn't have a job or a car, so she relied a lot on my parents to help out with things like uniforms for the kids' school and sports teams, as well as the basics like toiletries and everyday clothes. Now, my parents aren't rich. My mom works something like 50 hours a week just to get by, and my dad does contract work where he can find it. So the fact that they allowed someone to move and that isn't their child and were willing to contribute financially to supporting her and her kids. Generous as fuck. Fast forward to Christmas. My parents scraped together what they can to give the kids a decent Christmas. They couldn't afford most of the extravagant sheet the kids asked for, but it was a Christmas spread that most anyone would have been pleased with. Along with the video games and toy cars, my mom made each of the boys a fleece blanket printed with the logo of their favorite sports team. One kid was gracious and appreciative. The other? That little faker's face dropped when he opened the blanket. He didn't say a word of thanks and basically pushed it aside to open the other gifts. Later on, he said something like, "I wish I got something else instead of that stupid blanket." I'm so grateful my mom didn't hear it because I know it would have made her really sad. That kid got the verbal faking lashing of his life from me and my dad. A woman with less restraint than I would have set each one of his faking gifts on fire, save for the blanket. Jerk. HMM. Probably my cousin. when she was 14, now 15, not getting Uggs, a BlackBerry. Although spoiled brat girls have a BlackBerry here, my entire class, not kidding, had a BlackBerry, and I was the only one with a Samsung Galaxy XD, and her mother wouldn't let her go to the club she wanted to go to, but she wasn't as too young for that responsibility. Especially since it's never a good idea to be outside at night being a caked in makeup girl. Well, she yells at her mom very often. Her grandma gave her those ugly boots, Uggs, and a BlackBerry. And the year after, her little sister got one too. She bought it partly by herself, and her grandma paid the rest of the money. Her little sister is now 12 and has a not very serious form of autism. So the older one got mad and all, because she couldn't buy anything. Her mother and grandmother had to remind her that she already spent all of her money on clothes and whatever more. I'm always really modest when it comes to gifts. I always said thank you to older people and stuff, and sometimes when my dad wanted to give me something once again, I had a pretty rich youth. If I look back on it now, I sometimes cried and said no, daddy, I don't need it. Now we are kinda poor and I'm still kind of careful with spending money on myself, so I never buy things for myself, and I was very grateful last week that my parents paid the books and materials for the college I will go to, even though I will pay a little part of it by myself, to not make them pay more than they can. A friend of mine, his name is John. John had freaking crappy situation. John told me he was left in an orphanage when he was just a newborn, so he grew up orphanages his entire life. One day, his birth mother finally finds him and apologizes for all the crap he went through. After a freaking crazy conversation, she tells him where to find his dad, so my friend John went out to find him. Once he found his dad, they had an awkward reunion, but then his father invited him to go hunting with him. Eager to see what father-son bonding truly was, John said yes. When John arrived at his father's house to go hunting, he arrived early, and to his surprise John found a nurse hooking his father up to a machine and taking his blood pressure. John's father explained to him that he had a failing kidney and was too far down the waiting line to receive a donor one anytime soon. John then decided after some thought he would give his father his own kidney. So the setup for the surgery, and John told me he woke up in the recovery room without his father. The nurse told him his father had left as soon as the surgery was finished. John left the hospital and went to his father's home, but he couldn't get in. His father had completely played him just for a kidney. He shut him out, took his kidney, and ran without even saying a simple thanks. My poor friend, John Loke, was really torn up by it. I have this weird story which began when I was in college. My family is somewhat wealthy, and they wanted me to do some sit there and take the money kind of job in their company. You have to learn your father's job. However, I just didn't want to depend on them any further, so I refused their offer. I just thought it would neither be fair nor add me any value. Instead, I started freelancing as a web designer and completed my projects during the nights and went to my classes in the mornings. I made like $1,500 per month, which is pretty awesome for a college student in Turkey. My parents didn't like what I did when I did it, and they couldn't get over the fact that I didn't depend on them that much anymore. Or maybe they had whole other reasons, but these are my best guesses. They kept complaining all the time, and finally, one day, they told me to go and find another place to live or accept their rules. So I found a new place. During those 4 years in college, with the money I saved from partying and rent, I could buy myself a car and a new PC. Windows license was too expensive, so I converted to Linux, one of the best things that ever happened to me. I also had a girlfriend who is 5 years older than me, and we started living together, and she really helped me with everything. She even paid most of the rent. They weren't happy about my girlfriend as well, not surprisingly. One day I went to visit my parents. My father told me if I sell the car and give him the money, around 20k, he would get me something better as long as I accepted to work for him. The job wasn't like the one they offered before, so I thought why not? So I sold my car and started working for him. He also got me the car as promised, not the exact one though, but I really didn't mind. Some months later, things started not working out. The biggest problem being that no one really took me seriously in there. I told my father that we could sell the car and I would get my share as I really needed a car and really wanted to leave the company. He said, of course, without a pause, like he was expecting it. So, I left. However, I never received my share. They also excluded me from their will, cancelled my health insurance without asking me. I could have paid it myself, and talked behind my back to all our relatives about how irresponsible I was, had some nasty comments about my girlfriend, who they didn't even meet, and we were planning to get married. When I asked, my father told me that he would still pay for my wedding. The groom's family always pays for the wedding by Turkish tradition, so he basically kept that money as an insurance, as if he needed it. They later made me break up with my girlfriend by a lot of tricky games. I don't want to get into details as it still hurts and what they did is plain evil. So long for all the plans for a wedding. Skip a few months, and they got sick at the same time. I lived with them for 2 months to take care of them. I actually had to take unpaid vacation, and I had a lot of financial problems, mortgage. In the end, my father thanked me and he added, "You must contribute to the money we spend to make this house run." They have a fully running medium-sized company and they really didn't need any money, by the way. TLDR, family takes son's money, doesn't give it back, sabotages his relationship, makes him look after them, asks for more money. I work at a local car wash, one of the more high-class ones that do detailing and more extensive washes. I happen to be the lobby cashier. People have to come in and pay. Well, one day when we were extremely busy, we had this lady and her daughter come in. They had gotten a $24.95 platinum wash and proceeded to hand me one of the gift cards for our place that I assume someone in her family had bought. Well, the gift card was for the 14.95 platinum exterior wash. So I scanned the card and it proceeded to deduct the 14.95 from the 24.95, at which I then told her the difference she needed to owe. This is when things took a turn. This lady then proceeded to tell me that the gift card was to cover the whole cost and showed me the gift card holder that said platinum on it in the handwriting of whoever had bought it. Of course, I explained to her that there are two different kinds of platinum washes, the 14.95 exterior and the 24.95 that does interior. She told me it doesn't matter, that the gift card says platinum and just platinum, and she should get the whole 24.95 paid for. I told her I didn't really know what she wanted me to do. She began saying she wanted to get her car out of the line for the wash, which would be near impossible as I looked outside, and she was next in line for the wash with 5 people behind her, and I told her I'd have to get a manger to help her, which ended up being a task, since the only one available I couldn't find anywhere. Anyway, I ended up finding him, and he came to the rescue, only to be bashed as well. I'd like to point out at this time there was a long line of 5 or 6 people behind this lady waiting to pay. The lady explains the issue to my manager and my manager explains that whoever bought the card didn't put which platinum it was or the price on it, and that he would gladly pay the difference for her. But no, that lady was not satisfied and demanded the sale to be voided and to have her vehicle taken out of line. Thing is, her vehicle already had been vacuumed and went through the wash. Her vehicle sat right in place after the wash, and after my manager voided the sale, her and her daughter stormed out talking about how this was complete bullshit. Which is crap. She held up everyone complaining, basically getting a free wash. She didn't get the inside cleaned, or the extra stuff the platinum wash gets after the machine wash, but still, you go through all that trouble to inconvenience everyone because of someone else's mistake, and then decline a manager from paying the difference. I'd say very ungrateful. I'd like to add that the whole time the lady was complaining and such, the daughter, who was around 16, I'd say, stood there with her arms crossed acting as if this was normal. That her mom always does this, and that there was nothing wrong with this confrontation. I know if my parents did this, I would try and convince them just to take the manager's offer and admit that there was a misunderstanding. My sister is selfish, ungrateful and very entitled. I could talk all day about this, but I'll tell the 2 worst stories I can think of. My sister was 23 and my dad gave her a car for free. He had one stipulation for her, which was, when your 16-year-old sister, me, needs a ride to work, she gets a ride to work. I should mention that my sister is unemployed at the time and surviving off my mom and spousal payments. She was divorced. So I have to go to work and she refuses. We get into an argument. I'm gonna be faking late and I threaten to call my dad. I should mention that she isn't refusing for a legitimate reason. She was watching opera or something. So she is like, fine, I'll drive your fat laziest to work. I lose it. Not only do I go to school full time and work 30 hours a week, I'm like 5 feet 2, 125 pounds, and as a teenage girl, self-conscious as all hell about my body. And this useless, unemployed lazy cunt is saying this to me. I spat in her face, packed my sheet, and moved out that day. Thankfully my employer didn't fire me for not showing up that day. I called in bawling, while my mom and sister were screaming in the background, and said I was leaving my household, so they cut me some slack. I stayed with a friend for about 7 months and only came home cause my mom said she couldn't survive without my child support payments, which my dad obviously stopped paying her when I left. This all happened about 6 years ago. Recently my sister and her boyfriend broke up, and she was having a hard time making ends meet. My mom remortgaged her fucking condo so that she could give my sister a $5,000 loan until she got on her feet. My mom then finds out that no, my sister and her boyfriend never broke up. He is still living with her and helping her financially. My mom tells my sister she has to start paying her back. My sister gives her $150 and says, you made the choice to lend me that money. It's your own fault for doing it. I can't afford to give you any more back. This happened about a year ago. My mom lives in a tiny condo with broken appliances, regularly needs me to send her money to make ends meet, and at almost 60 years old works full time at a restoration company, which is hard physical work. My sister just bought a 2000 bulldog puppy, live in a beautiful townhouse in a nice neighborhood, and has a new vehicle. She still regularly borrows money from my mom, and my mom babysits for her every single weekend. And now I'm mad. There was a girl in my class I was interested in, and she had shown interest back. We had hung out a few times, but nothing serious. Anyways, end of our program and we are required to do either an internship at a company and write a report or a senior project. We somehow or the other get recommended to do an internship at IBM in New York, which is amazing opportunity considering we live on a small island in the Caribbean. We are asked to submit a resume and cover letter for IBM to look over. Now I already have an awesome resume as I had previously lived in Canada for a while and had many jobs and a good amount of experience. I offer to look at her resume to help her. As I go through it, I realize the entire thing is just half a page of pure crap. So I tell her I'll redo her resume for her. We get together in a local coffee shop to go through everything. So I start asking her questions about her past jobs, her previous education, hobbies, interests, references, basically all the basic requirements one should expect to be on a resume. She answers the first couple of questions I ask, then starts getting annoyed at the next few. Then she completely flips out on me. Reason? According to her, details about your past experience are irrelevant and nobody needs to know it. I explained to her that this is IBM in New York and things work much differently there than it does here on our small island. But she would have none of it and yells and berates me in front of everyone in the coffee shop. Listening on, you would have thought I had cheated on her or we broke up or something. We were nowhere close to actually dating or being official on anything. So I tell her, that's it, I'm done. If you don't want to do this, then that's your prerogative. Never spoke to her again after that. Unfortunately, due to reasons of the people who work at my college are idiots, the internship with IBM fell apart and I ended up doing the senior project. I got an A. Last I heard she was working as a low level, pretty much student level, I.T. technician at the school. Meanwhile, I got an awesome job with great pay, benefits, my own office on the sister island, where the beach is 5-minute walk. Edit. Formatting. A friend I used to have was slightly mentally disabled. He was able to live on his own, had a job, and received help through some local organization, but you could tell just by talking to him, he had a mental disability. Because of that, he had some awkward quirks that drew people away from him. I was one of few that could pretty much handle the way he is, and I truly considered him a friend. He calls me wanting to start hanging out again, not having been in touch for a year or so. We hang out a couple times, then starts asking for some favors, like driving him places. I really didn't mind, even when they were quite inconveniencing, like having to take him to the laundromat at 6 in the morning. Then he asks me to help him move out of his freaking 4th floor apt with no elevator. And for a guy with a part-time job, he sure had a lot of heavy crap. So I bust my ass to help him move, burned my own gas in my own truck, and took an unpaid day off to be free that day. The next few weeks, he doesn't call me or anything like usual. I call to see if he wants to hang out, tells me he can't. I call again the next week and he says, I don't want to hang out with you anymore. My suspicions were confirmed a month later when his dad, who is the coolest guy in the world, calls me and apologizes for his son's actions. Apparently he told his dad all about how he started hanging out with me just to get me to help him with stuff and to help him move, and then stopped when he got what he wanted. He didn't exactly say that to his father, but his dad put 2 and 2 together. Unfortunately, just recently his dad died, and I've been receiving a bunch of calls from him again that I've been intentionally ignoring. He's been leaving voicemails wanting a shoulder to cry on and whatnot. I'd feel a little more bad if he didn't treat me like such a piece of crap. My 14-year cousin takes after my mother, glamour girl, shopaholic, and well, a bit self-centered. My mom went from being well off, family life, to broke, independent, to comfortably well off again, close to retirement, living it up somewhat. She basically does what she pleases, when she pleases, determined to enjoy things on her terms. We're all entitled to wanting to enjoy our lives, so w/e. Except that she spoils my cousin ridiculously, and said cousin has become an expectant little copy of her. If she works in some fashion, it's babysitting, which she bitches about having to do it all, and the people she's babysat for do her kind favors, such as pooling up the $, topping it off, and paying her in large, lump sums. She'll end up with $400 plus for barely more than a couple weekends worth of babysitting. She'll in turn take the money and go on a shopping spree at the mall, bragging on FB and such. You get the picture. Anyways. For Christmas one year, she waited until 2 to 3 weeks before the date and went on and on about all the things she wanted. Lo and behold, it was all stuff like Tiffany jewelry, fancy purses, designer clothes, a jet ski, as she wanted her own instead of having to share my older one with me, which I had just had to unwillingly sell for scraps to make ends meet for a month, @.c etc. That year alone, she got 3 Guxy wristlet purses, a Tiffany necklace and keychain, a pile of clothes, including multiple $150 a pair jeans, hundreds in cash, a new iTouch, she's lost one of those I believe, an iPhone, and multiple iPods now, and much more. The pile of stuff alone was intimidating. Now, consider too, that her family is struggling financially and has 2 kids to tend to. She got all this even with such limitations, and my parents only added to it. When asked how she made out for Christmas, she had the nerve to shrug and say it was just so-so, regardless of who asked her. She spent the cash in the week and most of the stuff has never been used, save for some clothes and the necklace that I've ever seen. And no one else made out as good as she did. And the process practically repeated itself every year in a similar fashion. Go figure. During Christmas Eve one year, my family was gathered around and we were opening presents. I was probably 6 at this time. A few family friends and their kids were also joining us that year. One of their friends had a very beautiful daughter who was probably 8 years older than me. I had just received a Game Gear and some games. One of the games was a Power Rangers game. At that age I was totally obsessed with them, and my mom knew this. Awesome present. Shortly after getting the Game Gear, my mom gave me another present. This was the very obvious clothing box and wrapping paper. You can spot it from a mile away. I opened it and found Power Rangers pajamas, shirt plus pants. I had the worst reaction to this. Thinking back on it, I didn't mind the pajamas. But the idea of me embracing the present in front of this girl, who was watching, made me say I don't want that, and I probably made a face too. My very Hispanic family came crushing down on me. Immediately the threats of taking all of my other presents came. I embarrassed my mom. I still think back on this moment and regret my behavior. I feel horrible every time I think about it. Reading some of these stories I realize that some people have these moments and don't learn from them. I guess this is especially the case when an adult/parent doesn't correct them. This moment changed me for the better. I'll do my part for society to not raise little monsters. Bit late here, and it's not half as bad as some of the other stories, but here's mine. It was recently my best friend M's 20th birthday, so her boyfriend is kind enough to give her, me and my other friend a ride to Thorpe Park, so we can spend the day there for good times. Well, the night before we are supposed to go, M's boyfriend goes to the dentist and has his tooth pulled, so he's in a lot of pain in the morning. It had been bleeding and leaking all night, and it was gross, but he still says he's willing to drive us all the way up there. It's about an hour and a half drive with no stops. So, we get up and get in the car, and M says that she wants him to take the quicker way, which is up the motorway. We all agree and set out. We get to the motorway and there's been an accident, so we are now stuck in traffic that looks like it's going to last a while. M and her boyfriend are in front and my other friend and I are in back. M starts to get pissy because we've been stuck for almost an hour now and we don't seem to be moving. She starts blaming him, telling him it'd be quicker if she walked. It's all his fault, he shouldn't have came this way. She never wants to do anything for her birthday ever again because it always goes wrong. Her poor boyfriend, bless him, is trying to calm her down and make her feel better by putting his arm around her and loving stuff like that, and she just tells him to fuck off and leave me alone. We ended up in that traffic jam for 4 hours, and even though she's my best friend, I honestly wanted to punch her in the face. TLDR, I tried to go above and beyond in customer service, given verbal abuse and threats of legal action in return. About 2 years ago I worked at a jewelry store. It was after Christmas and we were having our big Boxing Day sales, like over 50% off of sterling silver and genuine precious stone jewelry. One day I helped this lady with a silver and turquoise bracelet. She seems thrilled with her purchase and left, and I didn't think anything more of it. 2 days later she comes in fuming. She claimed that her bracelet had broken the moment she tried wearing it and came to me demanding we refund her the money. I was only a sales associate, so I had no power, but I explained to her our policy and how because it was on sale, it was final and there was nothing I could do about it. I was the only one working that day as well, so I didn't have my manager nearby to help me. This woman starts yelling at me in the middle of the mall. It was a kiosk, and throws all her cards in my face as she's throwing her autistic temper tantrum. I offered to fix it free of charge, as it was only an O-ring, but she wouldn't have it. She then brings her husband over, who was this 7+ foot tall skeleton looking motherfucker, who then starts yelling at me, all 5 feet 4 inches of me, as if that's going to do anything. I explained to him that my hands were tied, but that I had offered to repair it for free, or if that wasn't good enough for spoiled cow, take it to a silversmith to have it professionally repaired on my own faking dime. Well, after about 20 minutes of dealing with this woman and calling my manager asking what I can do, I decide to just ignore her and started closing the kiosk on the suggestion of my manager. We still had customers coming around to look at stuff, but instead of going away, she goes up to each potential customer, telling them not to buy from here. They have horrible customer service policies. Yeah, after I just tried to go above and beyond for her. She then starts the verbal abuse again, asking how can you sleep at night knowing you work for such a horrible company, and how I should be ashamed of myself, and threatening legal action against me personally. I was in tears by the time she finally left, but luckily, fellow mall employees came by to look after it, while I cried in the washroom and cleaned myself up, and as far as I know, she was banned from the mall. I, unfortunately, know a girl like this. She's my friend's girlfriend and is the most spoiled of our in a group of friends. She thinks her life is terrible because she went from living in a big house in NJ with a live-in nanny to a condo right on the beach here in New York. Her parents give her credit cards, no matter how many times she loses them, and cash, and whatever she needs. Her parents are so terrible to her. Even though they can't afford it, they are letting her dorm in the college she wants to go to and picking up the tab. She goes on and on about how they never do anything for her and that she's going to just make money stripping while she's in college. She also sucks all the money out of the group, getting pissy when her boyfriend doesn't buy whatever she wants. She once told me that my own boyfriend is required to buy me jewelry and expensive things. Meanwhile, my boyfriend lives out of state and I'm just grateful he spends the money to come visit me once a month for a weekend. She tries to avoid using her own money, making her boyfriend and myself take most of the food bill. One time we were all pretty broke and there's a bakery that sells little cakes for $1. So we scavenged the house for change and came up with about $4. My boyfriend said he had money and bought his own, not taking from the change pile. She, however, took from the change pile and she had $20 in her wallet. Just a terrible clingy needy person who we can't wait to get rid of once she leaves for college. TLDR greedy clingy girlfriend sucks money out of friends and family. Life goal is to be a stripper because her rich spoiled life is terrible. I used to work at one of those national chain ice cream places where they mix in your toppings on top of a cooled piece of granite or marble. On a pretty slow day, we had a rather large woman, even for an ice cream place, come into the store for some ice cream. About 10 minutes prior to her coming in, the ceiling above the slab began leaking directly onto the slab. Because of possible contamination issues, we could no longer use the slab until the leaking stopped and we could sanitize it. I let the woman know this when she entered the store. She proceeds to order a large amount of ice cream with 5 to 6 mix-ins. I explain again that I can't mix them in, but I'd be happy to put them on top in a bowl or on a cone if she'd like. This isn't good enough for her, and she complains that the people checking out at the register currently got their ice cream they had gotten plain cones with no mix-ins equals no problem. She starts fuming and yelling that she wants them mixed in, and I'm refusing business to a cash paying customer because I have had to deal with idiots like her often. Fuck food service. I keep calm and say I'll give her a discount for her ice cream for the inconvenience, but that I still can't mix it in. This goes back and forth for a couple minutes with various insults thrown in. You make other people ice cream for a living. You can't even do your job right. I make more than you can ever hope to, etc. I was in high school at the time. My manager tells her that if she doesn't want something we have unmixed for a generous discount, which we weren't required to do, she would have to leave. She says to forget it and then walks out. About 10 minutes later, I was helping 2 other customers when I notice the same woman walks in and goes straight to the bathroom. I thought whatever, people use our bathrooms all the time without buying anything. I don't care. We had a single family style bathroom for our location. Single door with lock, big area in there, etc. About 10 minutes later, she leaves the bathroom and walks straight out without making eye contact with anyone. 5 minutes later, I notice an odd smell and look around. I notice water had started seeping out from under the bathroom. I walk over and open the door to see what had happened. There is 2 to 3 inch deep water across the floor. More gushes into the store when I open the door, and the toilet is spewing more out. This woman had taken a massive sheet in the toilet, then stuffed an entire unraveled roll of toilet paper into the toilet, took the paper towel roll and stuffed some in there, and then flushed. It was a slow day, so it was just me, a new employee, and the manager, so I was tasked with cleaning it up, because apparently the new employee didn't have the experience. I was planning on quitting the next week anyways, as school was coming up, so I just said absolutely not and quit. TL. Doctor, obese woman couldn't get ice cream because of sanitation issues, so she shit in the toilet and intentionally clogged it to flood the store. My sister sounds like a lot of these people. Don't get me wrong, I still love her, but she's ungrateful as fuck. We are not rich, but we are not poor either. Both my parents work jobs that they have to do a lot of overtime for and never get anything for themselves. Well, my sister will go through about 6 phones in a year, cause she keeps breaking them and complain when she doesn't get another. I've had the same phone since 2008. She has also painted her room 3 times in the past 4 months and whines whenever she doesn't get to repaint it a week later. She beached because she didn't get $300 glasses frames. My mom hasn't had new glasses since 2009ish. She has a closet full of clothes and doesn't wear any of it. She instead opts to take mine, including bras and underwear. We are both different sizes in all things, and my bras don't even fit her. She has to stuff them. She wears my jeans. I have one pair now that fit me that aren't work pants, and stretches them. Then when I wear them, she tells me they look too loose. HMM. I wonder why. All of my attractive underwear has gone to her because she takes it. But Lord forbid I take something of hers. She throws a faking fit. My mother won't do anything about it. On another note, I remember one year there was this woman that my mom worked with. She had fallen on hard times and couldn't afford any Christmas presents or even a tree for her family. She was very upset about it and started crying whenever she told my mother that her children had told her, "It's okay mommy, we'll be okay, even if you can just get us oranges." Well, my mother and a few of her friends and co-workers got together and started getting stuff for them. We bought them a tree. My sister and I went through our clothes and gave some to her daughter. We got them all kinds of presents. About a week before Christmas, we call the woman up and tell her to meet us at the local hospital because something had happened. She comes and she sees the tree strapped to the top of her car. Immediately she knows something is up. We tell her to close her eyes and lead her to the trunk. In it are tons of presents and wrapping paper that we had all gotten together. She looks like she's about to cry, and my mom goes around to the front of the car and brings out a bag of oranges. She starts bawling. I've been reading this all day, so I guess it's time for me to share one of my many stories. Okay, this happened a month ago. My dad was thinking about getting a new phone, an iPhone, so I started looking online for him. Well, I found one on eBay, didn't buy it yet because he wanted to ask his cell phone provider about it first, which is Verizon. Well, anyway, we have to pick something up at my sister's boyfriend's place. I don't remember what. We were talking to her and her boyfriend for a while, then my dad brings up that he wants a new iPhone, and this is where my sister flipped sheet. She started yelling at him saying that she deserves one more than him and that he can have her old phone, which is a year-old Droid. Well, anyway, I defended my dad saying that he can get what he wants, he's an adult. Well, at this point my dad and I are just pushing her buttons purposely now because it's fun making her mad. She just start yelling and cursing. So while she was doing this, my dad, her boyfriend, and I are just laughing our ass off because she gets too wound up easily. My dad ended up not getting an iPhone, not because of my sister, but because he already had a contract with Verizon and he needed to be a new customer. Not really ungrateful, but pretty close. I was in college, about ready to go to a party. It was a Wednesday night and another friend of mine and I would usually go swing dancing, but this night it was party time. About an hour before I was going to leave, I'd get a text from her saying how awful her day was and how she really wanted to go dancing. Being the good friend, I said fine. I'd going dancing. I also said to be ready by 10 PM. I'm her ride. So about 9:45 I text her and ask if she's ready to be picked up soon. She responds back with something along the lines of, "What's the rush? I'm at a friend's house. Come hang out and we'll leave later." I said no, but I gave in and said I'd be by 10:30 at the latest because she'd had such a bad day. Around then she texts me saying that she's going to be late, and at this point I say fuck it and head to the party. I text her saying I'll let her know when I'm done. I'm at the party for a while and it turns out to be a dud, so around 11:30 I call her and say I'm ready to go dancing and to meet me at my car. She says okay, I'm biking over now. Fast forward to 30 minutes later and I'm just sitting in my car, fuming, wondering where the fuck she is. Finally she rides up to my house and gets into my car. I ask her where she's been and she says, "Oh man, I was at my friend's apartment and the snow was falling all over the place." Snow? Cocaine. We drove to the bar and I didn't speak to her the entire night. TLDR, change evening plans for a friend. She ends up doing cocaine all night. Okay, I thought of one that's about me being a brat. I believe it was my sophomore year in high school, and I was still best friends with B, and was still just boyfriend/girlfriend with my now fiance. Well, bowling is one of my favorite things to do, especially on my birthday, and I had already had plans to go bowling for birthday with my fiance and be well on the day of my birthday. B tells me that she won't be able to go bowling with me anymore, and of course I'm upset because we had planned this in advance and I was really looking forward to it, but I tried to get over it because hey, I still got to go with my amazing boyfriend. We get to breakfast, more like brunch, because it was around noon and it was supposed to just be me and the family because it was a Sunday and that's family day. My sister shows up to brunch with B in tow, and of course I'm excited to see her and think this means that she will be able to go bowling after all. And then my birthday presents are opened, and what do I get? Tickets to go see Jeff Dunham live that night. Of course I didn't show my disappointment to my parents, or at least I tried, but I was upset that I didn't get to go bowling. I mean, I was really looking forward to that, and I guess I was just thinking that I could watch him on the TV anytime I wanted, but I couldn't go bowling whenever because the only bowling alley near me is not cheap. In the end, I never got to go bowling, but I did enjoy myself at the show. He was as funny as ever, and I got to see his new puppet. Even now, I still kind of wish that we had gotten tickets for a different date, but I completely appreciate it because we had floor seats. It was hosted in an enormous basketball stadium in Dallas. Ungrateful is a very elusive term. I say so because we can never understand and anticipate when a person will thank us, or when we can and cannot expect thanks. I have friends whom I comfort often in times of need, for whom I let small insults and stuff slide, and whom I accommodate when I really don't have to. I praise them when they've done something good and never criticize them. I'm not so kind with other people. I admit I'm often rude and condescending, but never to my friends. And yet these assholes say that I'm socially incompetent, that I don't care about what people think, and I'm too judgmental. I don't expect thanks for comforting them and praising them. That would be terrible, and if I did, I might as well not be friends with them. But I do expect that when I do something intelligent in a social context, they don't say that I'm finally at their level. The odd thing is that sometimes I do wonder why they are my friends. I have so few to begin with because I often just don't see the point. I don't see the point in a relationship where I have to smile and wave and treat grown men like children and dogs. I understand the idea that we never know who can help us in our time of need, but I've found that there are very few who really can help others, and these are often not the ones that are really popular or really intelligent. These are just the people in the right places with the right people. The most discouraging thing is that the people I'm talking about are from really different backgrounds, and yet they are more or less prone to the same fallacies and bullshit as anybody. It's like it doesn't even matter who I'm talking to. In the end, they're going to act in pretty the same way, but it'll just look different. Like eating M&Ms or something. They may be of different colors, but there isn't an objective difference. It's just, I tolerate so damn much, I'll let go of so many things, and I take difficult and mature decisions. That is letting go of my own ego and allowing them to say whatever they want and praising them, and the least I can expect is for them to not think of me as a socially incompetent child. C'est la vie, I suppose. I worked at a Chinese restaurant for about a week 2 years ago. My first day is exactly 1 week after I had just had an ear surgery, so technically I should still have been in bed and on Vicodin, but money. Anyways, this woman calls in and orders half the menu, demanding that I repeat her order back at least 10 faking times for accuracy, which I do, because as obnoxious as she was a customer. I give her her total and tell her it will be ready in 20 minutes. At the time, there was a deal going that if you ordered so much food, you got certain things for free. Well, this woman ordered enough for free crab rangoon, general tso's, and steamed dumplings, doubling up 3 things that she'd ordered. When she came in, she paid and I gave her her receipt and helped her carry her 3 bags of food to the car, which is something I didn't have to do. Anyways, 30 minutes later the same woman comes back into the restaurant and gets in my face. screaming that I'd messed up her order and that I had charged her for about 4 things that she never ordered or received on top of the 3 extra things that she had that she didn't even want. I had told her over the phone that she'd be receiving free food with her order and I definitely didn't charge her for it. I asked to see her receipt so I could fix the mistake, though there wasn't one made. I really just wanted to show her that she was wrong, but she told me, screeched at me, that she had left it at home and that I had better fix the problem. Well, me being the clever one that I am, brought out the restaurant copy of her receipt and order. I showed her that she had not been charged for anything other than what she had been given and told her that we would gladly make her the 4 items that she hadn't received in her order. She continued her sheet, cursing at me, calling me a deaf beach, and demanding to talk to someone who could actually hear her demands, because clearly I couldn't. Thus came my manager, a mild-mannered Chinese woman who really didn't want to be brought into this, which is why she let me try to handle it. Well, she winds up telling the woman that she would be given the extra items free of charge as well as 4 egg rolls. The woman accepts this, but when my manager personally brought her the food and apologized to this beach, she was called a few derogatory remarks and told to A. go back to her country and B. die. The funny thing about telling her to go back to her country was that this woman was intermittently bursting into cussing at me in Spanish and had a thick accent that I could barely understand. TLDR, woman is given free food, accuses me of overcharging her and not giving her all of her order, then calls my manager, who gave her $50 more worth of free food, every racial slur she could think of. So I'm in Europe right now with my friend's family and another family they're friends with for a wedding. My friend and I are super happy and grateful her parents took us, and we've gotten to see so many beautiful things. I paid for half of my plane tickets and I pay for half of my food here and anything I want as a souvenir. I'm getting the most out of this trip as I can. However, the other family we are with have the most spoiled children ever. It's a guy and his 2 sons and his girlfriend and her daughter's friend. Let's call this daughter Jamie. So Jamie is 17 and the day we showed up she was stumbling around drunk. Already my friend and I are a little put off by her behavior, and she and the guys pretty much caused our table to get death glares all night. Anyway, so a few nights later all of us young people are allowed to go clubbing in a nice city in southern France. Keep in mind I'm 19 and all the guys we are with are about 21 to 24. However, Jamie's mom will not let her go because she's still pretty young and apparently back home she has been irresponsible and wild. My friend and I say we will make sure she's okay, and her mom says, okay, as long you come home decently sober you can go clubbing later in this trip. The second we get in the car she starts saying she's going to get really drunk and fuck a guy. She ends up downing 5 shots along with a few mixed drinks and made out with around 5 guys. Of course, when we get back her mom is disappointed and tells her she can't go out in Paris. She throws a beach fit like she deserves to go partying. A few days later she was upset because she wanted to go to bars and party in really revealing clothes when everyone else was going out for a nice dinner. She ended up telling her mom she hated her, she didn't love her, and she hated Europe and wanted to go home. Keep in mind everything she does here is paid for by her mom's boyfriend, and she doesn't want to do anything here besides party. Ungrateful beach. Stepsister. Well, the entire family that my stepdad built for 12 years. This dude is faking awesome. Ex-wife, we'll touch base here in a secretary, had a kid before she married him. This teddy bear of a army sergeant adopts that kid and raises him like his own. That kid treats him like shit and threatened to have him killed. Teddy is not the smartest person and did not cut all ties at that point. The kid was riding on Teddy's GI Bill until he got arrested for having a few too many shrooms on him. Pro tip, keep your car registration up to date. Ex-wife, ugly beach. Druggy, has probably slept with 42% of all the guys in 10 OHH and is raising her dog to be just like mom. Anyways, here's the greedy beach part. While Teddy was in Iraq in 07, she writes and asks for some money to get their house re-roofed. He sends money, she blows it on dope and sheet. It was like $20,000. Oh, did I mention she cheated on him dozens of times? Yeah. Stepsister. Just like mommy. But we'll cut to the most outstanding part. For her birthday, Teddy goes all faking out for her. Cake, dinner at the fanciest restaurant in town. Blah blah blah. He proposed to have her blow out the candles on her cake. 14th birthday by the way. She says something snarky like, well, don't you have to eat dinner before you do that? His face turns from happy to dejected just like that. My heart dropped. I'd been raised to respect your faking parents. She missed that apparently. He excused himself outside and walked out the front door. Mind you, it's January and the place is faking cold. I looked at her with my beach. What the fuck? Look and walk outside. I give old Teddy a hug and sit out there with him for a few minutes. Later my mom said she would have tossed the cake in the trash and told her to go fuck herself. Mind to mouth filters are non-existent in my family. Now, on a side note, my BO dad died in March of 08. That man was a faking saint, like you wouldn't believe. That's for a whole other time though. TLDR, my stepdad's a teddy bear who can kill you with his thumbs and has cunts 4 kids and an ex-wife. Edit. What my mom had to say about them. Aside from a few of the details being off, it was $40,000 not 20. First time we met the SB, he told his dad in the middle of a very nice restaurant to shut the fuck up. I'll do whatever the fuck I want to do. Followed by the 2-hour screaming fit of the house. And as for SS, it was the screaming, I'm not blowing out any candles. I hate cake and you know I hate cake, followed by the following birthday of since you didn't get me what I wanted for my birthday last year or for Christmas this year. She called her dad and told him how much she hated the Christmas present that I had bought and sent. I decided that you could pay to rent a cabin for me for a week in the mountains. At 50. Not going to happen. Thank you is non-existent in her vocabulary, and for someone who used to get mad if you celebrated a B-Day/Christmas, etc. JW. She was pretty darn demanding and undeniable. So this year she might get a card, but that is its point as for the previous year. After that house one screaming fit of hers. Again, I've been insisting on taking her out to dinner anyway. I said I'd throw the cake in the faking trash and her little neighbors can eat cold cereal, while the rest of us go out to eat. Fun times. Hey, don't feel bad. My sister-in-law is like that. Her husband spent about $1,400 on a party for her 30th birthday party, 3 weeks before her actual birthday, as it was a birthday/housewarming party. She was pissed she didn't get any presents, but did get home items. Then comes this past Saturday, where I was in the middle of my 30-day return period for an AT&T phone. I had a Galaxy Note, and about 22 days in felt it best to return as it was a sluggish, and not really that great. When I said I was going to Best Buy to return it, she immediately wanted to go as well. She went in her car back home, picked up her husband, and met my wife and I at Best Buy. As I was getting my return/swap done, got a SGS3, she threw a 5-year-old fit in the store saying that it was the worst birthday ever. It was her birthday that day because her husband refused to buy her a new phone. She gets a new phone every 6 months because she is bored or breaks it out of anger. So she storms out. He follows after her, and about 3 hours later she stops by again at home and says she bought herself the phone and disconnected his service on his current phone and bought him a new one as well so he wouldn't get pissed at her. She pulls all this stupid crap all the time. She was a very spoiled girl in her younger years, and it really shows now that she is older. Beer budget, wine taste. This isn't really a horrible child story as many of the others here are, but rather something amusing that happened to my family a long time ago that this whole thread reminded me of. Just thinking about it still brings a smile to my face every time. One Christmas morning long ago, when I was just a little kid, myself and my 2 younger siblings were happily tearing into the goodies Santa had brought us and playing with all our shiny new toys. As things wound down, my sister complained that she had not gotten nearly as many presents as the rest of us and got quite upset. As any reasonable parent would, my parents told her she must have gotten nicer things, but just less of them, and she should stop being so greedy. So she sulked and pouted a bit, but got over it pretty quick and decided to enjoy what she did get rather than worry about what she didn't. So things turned out for the best. Well, it was about that time that somebody noticed that one of the presents they had bought was nowhere in sight. After a quick trip to the secret present hiding spot, it was discovered that my sister's entire from Santa present pile had accidentally been left behind. Needless to say, the rest of us were quite jealous that she got 2 Christmases while the rest of us only got 1. I was invited to new stuff. It was Christmas Day, and as a gift my parents got me GTA, Vice City and then Blood Omen for the GameCube. Later in the day I went out to my best friend's place. His parents had their friends over who brought their little kid, about 10 I want to say at the time. I heard them over the phone, so I brought only Blood Omen over. Well, the 10-year-old got wind I had GTA, Vice City, and the entire time over there was asking me to go home and get it. I kept telling him no. He asks, I say no. He asks, I say, look, you're too young to play it. You can see this game, cause not as violent as GTA, is a vampire running around sucking knights and other things blood. But he doesn't curse and swear like you at all. The kid would say fuck this and fuck that all the time, and GTA has every single item listed on why you should not be allowed to play it. So once again, no, I will not get it. This shut him up a bit, but then he came back and asked one more time. I had it and looked at him and said, look, what the hell did I just say last time? He gets a little sheepish and goes, no, correct. And what do you think I will say this time? No. Correct again. What do you think I will say next time? No. Exactly. I will no go home and get GTA, even if I had it with me. I wouldn't even let you play it or watch me play it. So one last time. No faking way, I got home and get GTA so you can play it. The kid storms off, and then about 30 minutes later I hear him tell his dad I'm being mean to him cause it's Christmas and I won't go get the game I have at home he wants to play, and this makes his dad flip on him. I was shocked and amazed by what this kid already received. Cell phone, a pager, as PS2.6 games, and $500. Spoiled as brat, though I did laugh when they walked away from me cause his master plan of bringing dad in failed. I owned a house I wasn't living in. We were living in another house that my employer provided, and my older brother, he was in his upper 30s at the time, was down on his luck with a divorce and underemployment due to the horrible Michigan economy, so I let him move in rent-free. The house was an older, larger 2-story brick house, 1,900 SQFT, with 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. Privacy fenced-in backyard with a 4-car garage and a basement for storing boxes and other rarely used items. We'd not finished. 2 bedrooms and a bath upstairs and the rest of the house on the main floor. I made the agreement that he could live in our house on a couple conditions. The second floor was reserved for my family when we were in town visiting, so we didn't have to stay in a hotel. He paid the energy and water bills, mow the lawn and shovel the drive, and walk when it snowed. I left him a new Honda mower and a new Husqvarna snow blower. Clean up his dog's messes in the yard. He had a med/large Brittany Spaniel. The first time we came into town a couple months after setting up this arrangement, we arrived to the back door wide open, the screen ripped out, a children's pool added to the backyard for his dog to swim in, the garage door, 6 months old, $1,200, bashed in and the opener not working, muddy dog prints all over the house. And when I went upstairs to settle in, I discovered the worst part. The dog was using the whole upstairs as his toilet and there were over 30 sheet piles in the 2 bedrooms. I was furious. I called his cell phone, no answer / didn't leave a message. I took my family to a local hotel and paid for a room. I called my brother again. This time I left him a message where I was and told him he was going to pay for the hotel room and we talk about the house face to face. He called me back 5 minutes later and asked why I was staying in a hotel. I told him I'd tell him to his face, but kept pressing the issue. Sounded drunk on the phone. So I told about the messes and the lack of respect he was showing me. I demanded that he pay to have the whole house steam cleaned, but he said he could clean it up himself easily. That's when I lost it and told him he had to move out. I didn't tell anyone until now about that story. The rest of my family thought I was being a jerk at the time, but I said it was between me and my brother. I assume he didn't give the details out either. To top it all off, he never paid a single bill and they ended up going into collections in my name and are now on my credit report. And they are the only negative marks on my report. One thing I have learned in my 41 years on this planet, don't expect people to respect relationships or things the same way you do. A good story involving my younger sister. She was married in 2010. 4 months after our dad had died. They were estranged, but I was very close to him and took care of him the last few years of his life. So, already dealing with extreme grief, now dealing with a bridezilla of a sister I can't stand, and she decides to run everyone helping her with this wedding through the ringer, changing her decorations / theme a week before the wedding, screaming at me, our mother and grandmother, because we weren't helping her, but when we asked what we could do to help, got the brush off. Screaming fights with my mother while we were trying to get the food prepped the day before. Hated her fake flowers that she ordered sight unseen online, which resulted in my oldest stepsister and myself running to meet her the night before and using our own money to buy as many red roses as we could find. All around poor planning, resulting in myself as maid of honor and our mistress of ceremonies having to run around the morning of the wedding to make sure there was some way to play her wedding music, etc etc. The wedding happens and is beautiful. Reception goes very well. Sighs of relief all around. 3 days later, she informs me that she and her new husband were going to annul the marriage, but that I couldn't tell my mom and stepdad because our stepdad was working on my sister's car at the time, and if he found out, he'd push it into the street and she needed her car. Almost a year later, her and I were talking over lunch, and she mentions that no one in the family seems to like her anymore. I point out how so much of our family helped with her fake wedding and didn't get a thank you from her, and she never wrote out thank you cards for everyone who came to the wedding since she kept all the wedding presents. Her response? They know I'm thankful, I don't have to tell them thank you. My wife and I have a friend who can be pretty unreasonable at times. She should really be in therapy or something. Serious anger issues, depression, and massive trust issues. A real happy mix, yeah? When she doesn't have shit going on, she can be a lot of fun, and she's one of our oldest friends. She was even the maid of honor at our wedding. Anyway, she gets into a huge fight with the rest of our group of friends, who are all roommates. We're a really tight-knit group, but she kind of went over the line with them. It was really fucking stupid how it went down, but it's not important how. Long story short, she gets kicked out. The instant this happens, she was at our place at the time. We tell her she can stay with us. We loan her some money for some stuff. It wasn't anything essential, just quality of life type stuff, cause she seemed pretty bummed with the agreement that we'd be paid back as soon as possible since it was on our credit card and we'd be accruing interest. Keep in mind, we are all friends, and we have no idea how our other friends will react, or if we'll end up losing friends for siding with her. It was a pretty big risk for us, but we didn't even think twice. We really just didn't want her to be homeless. Most of the time she's here, she spent complaining how she lost all her friends and didn't have any friends left, which of course made us feel just awesome. We try and tell her that she still has us, and she just kind of scoffs and acts really dismissive towards us. We had to constantly hear bitching and she talking about all our friends, even though we made it clear we were staying out of the fight. All we'd hear was how horrible they were being to her and how they were trying to turn everyone against her, and they were assholes who kept faking with her. Meanwhile, we are hearing literally nothing like this from their end. In fact, she never even comes up when we see our other friends. But whenever we are leaving to go see any of our other friends, she'd act really accusatory towards us and say things like tell them to go fuck themselves for me when you see them, or tell them I hope they die. Super mature stuff. Then, she starts getting even more moody and starts being super critical of my wife whenever she says anything. Like, she just can't help herself contradicting whatever my wife says, or correcting her, even when it doesn't matter, or is some stupid shit, or whatever. Generally, she's a massive asshole to my wife. But by this time, she's dating our roommate, so even once she gets her own place, she's over all the time, and our choice is either A, tell her she can't come over anymore and deal with fallout from both the roommate and from her, or B, put up with it and just go hang out in our room when she's over. She completely takes what we did for her for granted, and months later we are still carrying a balance on our credit card, waiting to be paid back, because money is tight. Even though she is constantly buying drugs. TLDR, friend gets kicked out, we risk all our other friendships to make sure she's not out on the streets and let her know she's still got friends. Friend then cheats all over that and treats us like crap. Fun times.